Hello, everybody. This is Empowering Democracy, and I'm your host, Joe Firestone. I know my image is frozen on the screen. I have tried to unfreeze it a couple of times already. It's not working, but I'm pretty sure you can hear me. Anyway, please comment if you can hear me so I know that my sound is all right and that you can hear. Okay. Anyway, I think we have a real good show for you today. I was expecting Dee to arrive, but she's not arrived as yet. Oh, I hope she will, but I'm still going to begin the show. Our topics today are war hawks, destroying the UN, saying no or Nyet, once again, Oreshnik, also myth, the role of myth in Trump dealing with Putin and Putin dealing with Trump. Okay, next is the Iran defense. And finally, the final topic is patience. The patience of Putin. And we have Dee arriving right now. Hello, Dee.
Hello, you sound staticky.
I sound what?
Static.
I sound like there's a lot of static.
Yes. And it's like a line going through and you're stiff.
Yeah, I know there's a line going through, and I know that I'm frozen.
And you also sound very staticky.
Dawn Foster says, my audio quality is not good, but I hear you. So if you will stay there, Dee, I will refresh everything.
Okay, sounds good.
Try to come in again.
Okay. And I'll start sharing the show around.
Thank you. That's very.
Okay, where did my phone go? Let's share the show around. Okay. Hello, Dawn. Hello, Kathleen. It's a threesome. Yes.
Okay.
And here's Joe.
I think I'm still frozen, but my sound might be better.
No, it's still the same. Evelina just came in. I still hear the static.
Still here.
I don't know why it's doing that to you.
I do not know why either. Maybe what I have to do is reboot my machine completely.
Okay.
So I'll try that and I'll come in again.
Okay.
Okay. I think maybe that's the best thing to do at this point.
Yeah, sounds like a plan. Because you have a long show tonight.
I do have a long show.
And you want better sound quality.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, hello, Steve Wolfbrand. Hello, Evelina. It's good to see the gangs all coming in. And I'd appreciate it if you could share the show around. Like, share, and subscribe. It's very important. And for those watching on X, to follow Joe. I'm sharing on Facebook now. I gotta find Joe. Firestone. Yeah, Joe's got a lot of info he's going to be presenting tonight. So it'd be good if he can get his quality better and his system. Okay. Sharing and sharing and sharing. Letting people know we're here. See. Share to my page. My Around the World D and Friends page. The people know Joe's live. Share in some groups on Facebook. Let them know Joe's in the house. Joe's live. Hopefully we get a good crowd here tonight. Let's see, group. Some more groups that I need to share to.
Finally, something's better.
Yes, you look better. You sound better.
Good. Kathleen Yvonne Westbrook says, rub the webbed hat. Can't rub the wet hat. That's my Medicare for All hat. Sorry about that. Okay.
Okay, that's good.
So let's begin again.
Okay.
I'm joined by Dee Pierce,
Happy to be here.
the host of Around the World with Dee and Friends, and I'm your host, Joe Firestone. And this is Empowering Democracy. And please do share, like, and subscribe as much as you can. Get people here. Topics for tonight are war hawks, destroying the UN, saying no again, uh, or the Russian for no, which is Nyet. Oreshnik, the role of myth, okay, in the negotiations of Trump and Putin. Also, Iran defense, beefing up the Iran defense, and the patience of Putin. That's a lot of topics we have to go through. I hope you'll find the show fascinating. But the first thing we're going to do is share it on Facebook.
Yes, let everybody know Joe's live.
On Facebook.
Yes.
Live on Facebook, yeah.
Yep, you got your crowd in the audience, your Facebook watchers.
I got a Facebook crowd.
Yeah, look on the no, your people that watch on Facebook. Evelyn is here.
Yeah.
Kathleen is here.
Right.
So Steve watches it on both.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, I'm sharing on X.
Okay, thank you. So, I'm going to start with our first piece, which is a piece by Pepe Escobar, and I'm going to share that. Share the screen. The main name of the piece is Even After the Headmaster's Humiliation. Europe insists that peace is war. That's why this one is called War Hawks. So there's President Trump, and sitting in front of him are a whole bunch of European characters. We have Keir Starmer, Georgia Maloney, Chancellor Merz of Germany. The guy in the middle is probably Macron. The guy sitting next to him is probably the president or prime minister of Finland. I am missing this guy who's to the right of Zelensky. And the final guy on the left is from the Netherlands. He's actually the Secretary General of the EU right now, I believe. Not the EU. Secretary General of NATO now. And he is Mr. Rutte. His first name is Mark. The empire of chaos is at war, hybrid and otherwise, not only against BRICS, but against the integration of Eurasia. It took just one pick to imprint on posterity the utter humiliation of the Eurotrash political elites in year 2025. The coalition of the twats, God,
Mhm.
in the Oval Office, lining up like a bunch of frightened school kids, severely reprimanded by his master's voice. The headmaster cum circus ringmaster. That was also neatly described as Trump breaks Europe over his knee. Of course, President Putin had already predicted it over 6 months before the fact. Quote, I assure you, Trump, with his character and persistence, will restore order quite quickly, and all of them you'll see soon, all of them will stand at the master's feet and gently wag their tails. The White House uh, the humiliation sealed the deal and reconfirmed an obsession for the Eurotrash, quote, leadership, unquote, at all levels when it comes to relations with Russia. Peace is war. Brandishing their warped uh, uh, um, uh, logic, they cannot possibly understand that if Ukraine is instrumentalized, actually since before Maidan in 2014, to harass and destabilize Russia and its western borders, Russia will forcefully counterattack. That's at the heart of the Russian concept of underlying causes, quote unquote, of the Ukraine tragedy, which must be thoroughly addressed if there is any real shot at Trumpian or not Trumpian peace, quote unquote. In the big picture, that translates as the empire of chaos in Russia sitting down to set up a new, quote, indivisibility of security, unquote, framework or arrangement. Just like Moscow proposed in December 2021, then it was met by a non-response response. Eurotrash incorporates new delirium is to attribute to itself the design of the future borders being a re-weaponized Europe, and a Russia that will inevitably inflict on it a massive strategic defeat. It's a very long shot to imagine that Trump is capable by himself of imposing a new strategic reality on the warmongering yet a penniless coalition of the twats. Whatever happens to rump Ukraine, Trump, based on his own twist and turn vociferations, actually wants Europe to, quote, contain, unquote, Russia from now on, using an arsenal of ridiculously expensive uh, American weapons. So what changes is the character of this particular chapter of the Forever Wars. It will be fought by the coalition of twats and not by Americans. In the short term, that also entails the only strategy available for the Eurotrash-Kiev combo: outlast Trump until the midterms, destroy the remainder of his presidency, and be secure with the return of the mega Russophobe gang in 2028. Which dead hand will prevail? An old school deep state hand who had privileged access to all Cold War era honchos summed up the pitfalls ahead for Russia. Russia is taking too long to neutralize Ukraine, allowing time for NATO to reignite diversions, While the snail offensive in Ukraine does save lives, NATO seeks to weaken Russia's strategic position in the Balkans and elsewhere that can cost far more lives in the future. If the Slavs in the Balkans are crushed, that can strategically weaken Russia's overall position. And that is far more costly than a major lightning offensive a la Stalin in Russian part of Ukraine. Russia must finish this war now and turn to its southern problems in the Balkans and the intrigues in Baku. Well, I'm not sure about what he means by the southern problems in the Balkans, but certainly the intrigues in Baku and the Caucasus could become a serious problem. But as we'll cover later on in the stream, I think the Russians have taken decisive action in that area. Trump, of course, is oblivious to these big picture types of niceties. At best, he admits to Fox News that, quote, Ukraine will not regain Crimea, unquote, and, quote, Ukraine will not join NATO, unquote. But he does not seem to mind that, quote, France, Germany, and the UK want to deploy troops in Ukraine as part of the new Kabuki, quote, security guarantees, unquote. That is an intergalactic red line for Moscow. In parallel, it is wishful thinking to believe that Putin is now finally ready to negotiate peace, quote unquote. This is not about peace. It's always about coming up with incontrovertible facts on the battlefield, because Moscow knows this war will only be won in the battlefield. Russian forces have reached the final Ukraine defensive line in Donbass, Slavyansk Kramatorsk, and is fast encircling key strongholds near um, um, uh, uh, Pokrovsk and Konstantinovka. Talk about a strategic psychological turning point. From there, the steppe sky is the limit. Compound it with the combined hacking of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, which revealed that Kyiv's losses in terms of dead and missing amount to a staggering 1.7 million. Now that compares with the estimates of 1.8 million from Colonel McGregor and Scott Ritter. So they were pretty close to the official numbers of Kyiv, it turns out. It also turns out that Kyiv was lying about the official numbers for quite a long time, when they knew, as was leaked from the General Staff, that they had lost 1.7 million people. I still think that maybe they're slightly wrong about that, and maybe Doug McGregor and Scott Ritter are right after all. All the above means that we are fast approaching the fateful moment when the victor dictates the full terms of the enemy's capitulation. No need to march to Bankova in Kyiv and plant the flag of Russia, to indulge in a tawdry Trump-spun, quote, peace, unquote, agreement carries an overlapping amount of serious strategic defeats for Russia. For example, leaving Odessa and Kharkov to MI6, okay, and the machinations of the Brits. At the same time, Moscow needs to start paying much closer attention to its underbelly in the south Caucasus front, where the mellifluous Turkish drive is to establish a tyrannic belt slash corridor. The empire of chaos is at war, hybrid and otherwise, not only against BRICS, but against the integration of Eurasia. Some of its implications will certainly be discussed in the upcoming SCO summit in Tianjin on August 31st to September 1st. Putin, Xi, Modi, and um, 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 Pezeshkian will all be at the table. And that should impress on all players the imperative of BRICS and SCO sooner rather than later, representing the whole of Eurasia, getting their act increasingly together, turbocharging not only their economic but also geostrategic cooperation. There's only one way to go. Negotiate with the increasingly out of control empire of chaos as a group. Putin and Xi already know it. Lula and Modi are starting to get uh, uh, the picture. Uh, um, I think also Pezeshkian is starting to get the picture. Meanwhile, the temptation is irresistible to frame Putin as granting Trump a magnanimous exit to get out of the imperial strategic defeat in Ukraine while saving face. The problem is the massive pieces war front will never accept it, and that goes way beyond the EU road trash Inc., including Atlanticist old money, key players in international finance, and the Walking Dead, but not really dead, group of neocons. Russia, China, BRICS/SCO need to be on red alert 24/7. The Peace War front is already in the process converting themselves into the NBT front, nuclear threats, bioweapons, and terror attacks. Russia may have a dead hand which will exterminate any attacker. The NBT front at best has the scrawny dead hand of a dead man that is walking. This was republished from the Strategic Culture Foundation by permission of the author or representative of the author. So this is Pepe's piece of insight for the time being.
Very to the point. Especially his choice of words getting to his point.
Especially his choice of words, but
Yes.
I object to the references to twats. I don't think that's appropriate. But of course, Pepe is anything but a woke person,
Right.
so he may not comprehend that. So anyway, but that was a pretty damn good piece, I think. I agree.
Mm-hmm.
So, keeping that in mind as a background, that is to say, we have war hawks in the background of the situation here at all times. We will check in with the comments to see if there are any as yet. Evelina is commenting. Good, good, good. Steve Wolfbrand says, shared on Facebook. Thank you, Steve. Steve says Trump's health is not good. Yeah, I noticed that too. He seems to be having problems, but they're probably going to be pretty good at keeping him around so they can use him. Kathleen says her mother called. She's a Trump supporter. She and Zionists did not like United Nations paralyzed by veto power, grabbing um, uh, um, by veto power grabbing colonizers. Mr. Wonderful says, hello, everyone. Hello, comrades. Hello, Mr. Wonderful, who also says Z. Kathleen says, wow, you're hit tonight, hit or hot. Kathleen says, Doc cleared me to stand in my own 2 feet. Kathleen says, dryer blowing, only one raccoon out, 2030 CST. Kathleen's really funny. If Russia believes peace will only come by victory on the ground, what is it Putin wishes to achieve in talks with Trump? What he wishes to achieve in talks with Trump is Trump's withdrawal of American support from the situation. He wants Trump to stop assistance to Ukraine. He doesn't care if Trump turns it over to the Europeans because he laughs at them anyway. Okay, but he wants Trump to get out and also to negotiate a generalized security framework with him. I think that's what is on the table again. The generalized security framework, peace between the 2 superpowers, and Europe can go hang as far as Putin is concerned. I think that is his view. So, getting now to our next piece, which was the topic of destroying the UN. That is an interview of Scott Ritter.
United Nations weapons inspector and a former Marine Corps intelligence officer, has developed into a seer. He's developed into a soldier scholar of some global security.
Those who don't know, that is George Galloway talking in a very complimentary way about Scott Ritter. And we will continue with that now.
Significant. And I'm glad to say he always answers our call. Scott Ritter, welcome to the show. Before we get on to what's probably the bigger in Ukraine, I wanted to ask you about this new missile that Iran has unveiled. Well, characteristically, it's still partially veiled, but its main attributes seem to be well enough known amongst military people around the globe. Is it in your view?
We already know that the Iranians had established missile superiority over the Israeli integrated anti-ballistic missile defense shield. That was proven during the 12-day conflict between Israel and Iran. What Iran is doing now is fielding even more advanced systems that are designed specifically to defeat the Israeli ballistic missile defense shield. Understand this, the Israeli ballistic missile defense shield isn't getting any better. There are no new weapons coming out. It is what it is. The Iranian ballistic missile attack capability is getting better by orders of magnitude. So if there is a renewed conflict between Israel and Iran, understand this, the Israeli missile defense shield will be overwhelmed immediately, and the consequences to Israel will be devastating.
You may think that an adult that can't stop watching the P word looks something like this, but this is what they're.
And is there any possibility in those circumstances that before anything changes, that Iran might take the initiative? After all, Israeli commanders and heads of the government are daily declaring that they're going to attack Iran. That gives a legal basis for self-defense, does it not?
I'm not a international lawyer, and I don't play one on TV, but my understanding of international law and the concept of preemptive self-defense under Article 51 established by legal precedent that's founded in the United States Supreme Court, yes, gives Iran the ability to preempt any Israeli attack. And if the Israelis...
I haven't heard people talking about a preemptive attack by Iran, but here it is. I think Scott's right about the legal aspects of it, but I'm still waiting for Iran to do that. They haven't tried before for some odd reason.
Are announcing it, if they're officials who are directly related to the decision-making necessary to launch a strike are talking about this, Iran has every right under international law to preempt that attack. Iran historically has avoided this kind of action, and I don't know if Iran would do this, but Iran does have the right to do it.
If they don't do it, what are they waiting for? Are they waiting for Israel to attack them first? Are they waiting for Israel to recover from the last set of attacks? From my point of view, that would be very foolish.
And the reports of unconventional weapons overnight in Jabalia, a camp I know well, are widespread. But of course, we lack the ability to investigate. There are no journalists left in Gaza, virtually none, and there are no officials who could investigate it. But
the Israelis have killed 237 journalists since the start of the war on October 7th.
Very widespread reports. For the first time, I may add, overnight, that chemical weapons may have been used in the munitions. Last night, you and I are both familiar with the use of unconventional weapons, depleted uranium in particular, in Iraq. Is there any possibility that, given the toughness of the fight in Gaza, that Israel may be resorting to unconventional weapons like that?
There's no doubt in my mind that Israel is capable of using these weapons. They possess these weapons. And there's also no doubt in my mind that the battlefield reality that exists in Gaza leaves Israel almost no choice but to employ these weapons if they are to have any chance of defeating a Hamas opponent who has buried themselves underground. And I think the purpose of these weapons is to deploy something that can penetrate underground and asphyxiate or otherwise neutralize the enemy. But of course, this means that civilians above the ground will be impacted. Israel doesn't care. They're committing an ongoing genocide of unprecedented magnitude in the modern age, the starvation, the deliberate targeting of women and children. So no one should be shocked that Israel would seek to embrace, what is in effect a war crime, because they're committing a war crime. Their very existence is a war crime nowadays.
Now, you worked for...
I think that's a memorable statement. Their very existence is a war crime nowadays. Something to consider.
Of the UN. Can the UN do anything at all about this, or indeed other international flashpoints that might lead to the world to conflagration? I mean, it feels to me like the League of Nations circa 1936. They declared a famine, but they have no means of doing anything about it. Is the UN finished, Scott?
Unless it gets fixed, it's finished. What Gaza is doing is driving a stake through the heart of the United Nations as an effective vehicle for guaranteeing the rights of peoples and nations around the world against violations of their rights, against the violations of international law. In order to have to intervene effectively, you would need a Chapter 7 resolution by the Security Council. And right now, the Security Council, because of the United States, is incapable of producing, a document, a resolution that would authorize meaningful intervention. For instance, it took a...
So just to reframe this just a little bit, Scott said Gaza is driving the stake through the heart, of the UN. Okay, but that's sort of an indirect kind of mention. It is Israel that is driving the stake through the heart of the UN with its genocide in Gaza. That the international community working through the UN is not able to do anything about. Now, recently, there are supposedly attempts by some of the Islamic states to come together, finally, to do something about this. Turkey, Saudi Arabia. There also have been recent attacks by the Egyptians on Israeli installations in Gaza. So maybe something is finally starting to shape up, but it's not going through the UN. It's going outside of the UN, outside of the framework of the UN.
Resolution 687 back in 1991 to authorize the work that I did in Iraq as a weapons inspector. A Chapter 7 resolution backed up by the force of the international community. You would need something similar to be effective in Israel, but the United States will never let that happen. And so long as the United States continues to wield its veto in defense of this genocidal regime in Israel, then the United Nations is all but dead.
Now, Scott, I posed.
Okay, I think he's right.
I think so too.
Yeah, he's put his finger on it. George Galloway put his finger on it. If so, historically, that's very, very significant because the United Nations was founded to do what the League of Nations could not. And now it's fallen victim to the same problems, as the League of Nations had. The inability to act in the face of states breaking the law of nations.
Question, a dichotomy really in my monologue. And my dilemma is this. I felt, I may have egg on my face, I might be entirely wrong, that Donald Trump actually did want to bring the Ukraine war to an end. If I was right, he clearly lacks either the motivation or the political strength to actually carry that over the line.
Well, they call him Taco Trump for a reason. Of course, most of the people who are calling him Taco Trump are talking about what he's doing with the tariffs and also domestic politics kinds of moves. But I think the expression applies here too. He can't stop the war inside, inside of Ukraine, because he won't stop it. He won't stop the shipment of arms. He won't stop the intelligence that's going to Ukraine. He won't put a stop things he has the power to put stop to. That's the problem. Taco Trump.
But equally, it's possible that I was wrong and that the whole Alaska affair was just theater. It had no meaning at all. It may be a false dichotomy, and you may have other contradictions to bring up, but the Ukraine war ain't coming to an end, is it?
Assalamu alaikum. This is an urgent appeal for the people of Yemen. The suffering in Yemen right now is truly unimaginable. 79% of the population is living below the poverty line, and 65% are classified as extremely poor. The hunger levels are unprecedented, nothing like I've ever seen before. Right now, I'm urging you to support Merci Perboten, who are providing food to starving families, needy orphans, destitute widows, and the elderly in Yemen. We need to show mercy. We need to show that mercy now. For only 100.
The Ukraine war will not come to an end.
Okay, that was an ad. I thought it was worthwhile to play. Okay, going on with this now.
on terms that will be acceptable to either Ukraine or Europe. This is absolutely sure. If the war is going to end, it's going to come on terms that will be dictated by Russia. Russia has indicated a willingness to work with the United States on the periphery to create cosmetic, political concessions. But on the core issues that are confronted or raised by this conflict, Russia will not yield on any of these issues. And it's clear to anybody who studies Russia, who's been to Russia, who's talked to the Russians, what this case is. And this is known by Donald Trump. I believe he was sincere in Alaska. I do believe that he is seeking a peace, but I also recognize the reality that Donald Trump is surrounded by people who do not want peace. There is a political reality in the United States that the opponents of Russia, the opponents of peace, are betraying this president as he speaks, to include some of the people that he brought with him to Alaska. They do not want peace. And so the president has to play political games. He has a very critical midterm election coming up that if he doesn't carry, if his party doesn't carry and sustain control of the House and the Senate, his term is over, finished. He won't get anything done that he wants because he'll be stymied by Congress. And so this president has to say things and posture and do things that, people like you and I who are hoping for decisive action on the part of the president will be disappointed in this. But I believe you're going to ask a question about the missiles. And so I'm going to preempt your question and just to show this as a case study. The missile in question, the ERAM, Advanced Extended Range Attack Missile or something, it's a missile that was created in 2023, 2024, specifically for Ukraine by the United States Air Force. Created means conceptualized. They had 2 years to begin production. The missile has not gone into serial production yet. It's still a theory, a concept. Trump can speak of selling 3,600 and some odd missiles to Ukraine. These missiles don't exist. They haven't been built yet. The maximum production capacity for the ERAM is 1,000 missiles per year. They have to begin serial production. So what Trump has done is said in 6 weeks, we will begin delivery of a system. That means that we might be talking about 5, 6, 7, 10, no more, because they don't exist. They have to be built.
In 6 weeks, the war may be over.
This is a game being played by Trump.
I'm serious about that. I think Ukrainians are close to collapse at this point. I think a number of other people think that too. If we're right, those armaments are going to arrive after the war is over.
That says, look, Russia, he's actually not talking to the Russians. He's talking to the his political opponents, saying, I'm willing to give Ukraine the ability to defend themselves. We're going to provide these weapons, but it's a joke. These weapons don't exist. They have yet to be produced. And when they are produced, they won't be produced in numbers sufficient to tilt the balance. And the United States maintains a veto over how Ukraine can use these. So you give Ukraine weapons, but then you say you can't use them because.
Sorry.
Before we get on to what's probably the bigger in Ukraine, I wanted to ask you about this new missile that Iran has unveiled. Well, characteristically, it's still partially veiled, but its main attributes seem to be.
These missiles don't exist. They haven't been built yet. The maximum production capacity for the ERAM is 1,000 missiles per year. They have to begin serial production. So what Trump has done is said in 6 weeks, we will begin delivery of a system. That means that we might be talking about 5, 6, 7, 10, no more, because they don't exist. They have to be built. This is a game being played by Trump that says, look, Russia, he's actually not talking to the Russians. He's talking to the his political opponents, saying, I'm willing to give Ukraine the ability to defend themselves. We're going to provide these weapons, but it's a joke. These weapons don't exist. They have yet to be produced. And when they are produced, They won't be produced in numbers sufficient to tilt the balance, and the United States maintains a veto over how Ukraine can use these. So you give Ukraine weapons, but then you say you can't use them because Trump understands the moment the United States greenlights the use of these weapons, we become an active participant in the conflict, and any chance of having a negotiated settlement with Russia is out the window. And that would be a political disaster for Donald Trump in the lead up to a midterm election where his base believed him when he said he will stop this war in Ukraine. And if Donald Trump is seen instead of becoming an active participant in this conflict, then that's it for him politically. So I think this is just one big smoke and mirrors thing done by a president who you rightly have said is somewhat weak when it comes to standing up to his opponents. This is a time for the president to show strength, to tell Europe to pound sand, to tell Zelensky to bend the knee or die. This isn't a time to play stupid games, but unfortunately, this is America, and all politicians of both stripes do is play stupid games.
I do think there was a deal between Trump and Putin in Alaska. I think the deal was for Putin to try to end the war as quickly as possible, and for Trump to do his part by handling the Europeans, the seven dwarfs, as they often are called. So Trump's role is to trick the dwarfs. Putin's role is to end that war by causing the collapse of Ukraine. Then Trump can sort of grab credit for ending the war, even though he didn't end the war. Okay, and he can say to his donors, well, I didn't do it. It was Putin. And I couldn't really do anything about it with Putin because nobody wants a nuclear war, right? I mean, you don't want a nuclear war. I don't want a nuclear war. None of us wants a nuclear war. We wouldn't survive. So.
The subject of Europe, I felt it was a bad idea to allow the seven dwarfs to show up. It was bound to at least inhibit Trump's ability to force Zelensky into the concessions which would be necessary. And on that, I think I approve.
But I don't think Trump has to force Zelensky into concessions. I think Putin can force him into concessions or force him out of the picture completely. I mean, if Putin goes for the Oreshnik, putting that into Bankova Street, we could be talking about a decapitation here. And then you don't have to worry about what Zelensky is going to say.
Right, because although the photo optics of these dwarves sitting there in front of the headmaster on one level looked bad for Europe, Europe is getting its way. They are continuing to prolong this war, even though they are not, at least until now, shouldering most of the financial burden and don't have an army, navy, and air force between them, between all of them. The British, the French, the Dutch, the Danish, and the rest could not dream to get into a shooting war with Russia. They want America to do that for them.
100%.
They don't believe how toxic this is. If you're still using a plastic or wooden cutting board, you need to hear this.
But I have a different perspective on this. First of all, Russia is not afraid to continue this war because it's a war that Russia is winning decisively. Europe is unable to alter this reality whatsoever. Moreover, these seven dwarves, as you call them, that's kind. It's sort of an insult to dwarves. What did they get? They wanted to get the United States to agree to Article 5, that's a reference to the NATO Charter, a collective defense article. An attack against one is an attack against all. I'm frozen, I think. I don't know if you can see me, so I'll wait until I unfreeze.
I can still hear you, Scott. I can still hear you.
Okay, I think we're back. Article 5 protection, that's what they wanted. NATO, Article 5 protection. They're not getting it. Donald Trump basically told them no. The United States will not support this. And without American support, there is no Article 5. There is nothing. And nobody in Europe can change this. So there's a lot of talk about something. Nothing happened. Moreover, the humiliation they had to feel as Donald Trump stopped their discussions to call Vladimir Putin. It proves that Donald Trump puts more credence in the opinion of the Russian leader than he does of the seven dwarves. They left humiliated. But again, the idea that Europe is extending this conflict, Russia doesn't care. 1.7 million dead Ukrainian soldiers, we now know. 625,000 of them have died this year. This is just August. The kill ratio is going up exponentially every month. If the Ukrainians want to lose the totality of their manpower on behalf of a discredited European continent, so be it. The Russians don't care. They're going to win this war no matter what. And that's a reality that I think Donald Trump has recognized. He has to play stupid political games with his American backstabbers, with the people who continue to oppose peace. But ultimately, Donald Trump, and the proof is clear. Donald Trump went into Alaska threatening Vladimir Putin. If you don't agree to a ceasefire right from the start, I'm out of there and all hell is going to break loose. But after a short meeting with Vladimir Putin, Donald Trump said, nope, no ceasefire. We're looking for a comprehensive solution to the root causes of the conflict. That's Russia's position. This proves we know who's calling the shots here. And it's not Donald Trump, and it certainly isn't the seven dwarfs.
Finally, Scott, as it happens, I know Venezuela rather well. Is it seriously to be expected that as the ultimate diversion, the peace president is going to invade Venezuela? Because I think I can definitively promise no good would come out of that for the United States.
Look, I'm a former Marine, and I have the highest respect for the professionalism of my fellow Marines today. 4,000 Marines are not going to invade Venezuela. They're there as a demonstration of force. That's it. They may make, I don't know what the president's planning, but to go into a nation the size of Venezuela with a military as well trained as the Venezuelan military, with a population ready to rise up and defend Venezuela, you would have to come in with forces that number in the hundreds of thousands, if not millions. And we simply don't have the force. So this is Marco Rubio.
I completely agree with with Scott on that. As soon as I heard that Venezuela was calling up 4.5 million people in the militia to defend it, I mean, it was obvious the United States could do nothing with 4,000 Marines. It was even ridiculous to contemplate it. And I'm glad that Scott has validated that here.
Those muscle flexing, trying to put pressure on Venezuela to create a diversion. Marco Rubio doesn't believe in Ukraine. He doesn't believe in making peace in Ukraine, and he's losing that conflict. So what Marco Rubio is doing is, starting to talk about what he does care about, which has always been intervention into Latin America, into South America.
And specifically what he's always cared about is intervention when it comes to Venezuela. In other words, the last time the United States was trying to do something about that, by setting up a puppet, which who we claim was the president of Venezuela, there were some altercations at the border, with the Colombians, if you recall. And Marco Rubio was down there, cheering on the Colombians to, support an attack on Venezuela that was thoroughly crushed in just a few hours. Yeah, it was really ridiculous.
Flexing muscles, though, that the United States doesn't possess. The United States doesn't have sufficient military power right now to project any meaningful military force into Venezuela. We've lost Colombia. That used to be a place where we could talk about, staging military force. But Colombia and Venezuela now are on the same page, talking about joint defense. This is just ridiculous flexing on the part of Marco Rubio, and it'll lead to yet more embarrassment for the Trump administration.
And is he out?
Okay, so let us end it. Okay, at that point, I think that's enough. Lots of great insights from Scott here. I think the height of it, the most important point, in the video, was that what's going on in Gaza is going to lead, to destruction of the UN. Okay, I think that's a prediction which is probably, on the mark. Let's take a look at your comments at this point. Evelyn says, okay, a generalized peace framework between Russia and the U.S. is the ultimate goal of Russian peace talks. Got it. After the war, Kathleen says, hey, I got to go. Thanks. End the occupation. 2 witnesses, 1,216 now, 570 days. Not sure what that references to. Steve Wolfbrand says hi to Mr. Wonderful. Okay, so please share, like, and subscribe. Our attendance right now is too low. It's roughly at 19 people. We should have a lot more. The next topic, though, the next topic is, I believe, saying no again. So let me get that. Okay, Nyet again. This is a short piece.
If there is convincing evidence that Azerbaijan acted against us, we will act differently, Ali Larijani, acting secretary of the Supreme National Security Council of Iran, said in an interview with Khamenei. According to him, Iran has no evidence of Azerbaijan's cooperation with Israel during the 12-day war. We must rely on reliable facts. Some people claim something, but we need precise evidence. The Azerbaijani government says that this did not happen, and we have no reason to distrust this yet. Keep in mind that Azerbaijan is a neighboring Muslim country, culturally close to us and friendly. There may be disagreements on some issues.
Okay, to say something about that, they are a predominantly Shia country. So they're close, in that respect also. But the head, of Azerbaijan is very ambitious, to say the least. And he has been supporting Israel with oil through the whole period of the genocide.
Like other neighbors. We always take this factor into account. Friendship is complicated. You can be friends in some areas and have disagreements in others.
Okay.
The quickest way to clear out stuck poop.
The number one food for
Sorry.
Oh, well.
Even large countries like Russia and China have ties with Israel, but we act based on our own interests, Larijani said. Answering a question about possible actions by Azerbaijan against Iran, he said that it is potentially possible, but not now. Azerbaijan does not officially take action against us, and we have no convincing evidence. If it ever appears, we will act differently, but so far there are no grounds for this, Larijani said. Since June, the price of liquefied gas in Armenia has increased by 1.5 times. As a result, Yerevan has turned to Tehran with an urgent request to provide a quota for the import of liquefied gas, writes the Telegram channel Sipa Pozdaran. While Iran annually burns about 3 million tons of liquefied gas in flares and distribution networks, a volume that can easily cover Armenian demand and at the same time strengthen Tehran's position in the energy market of this country. Gas exports to Armenia can disrupt the Zangezur Corridor project, designed to oust Iran from regional energy equations. Azerbaijan is counting on this project to increase gas supplies to Europe, the resource reports. Quote, "The Caucasus has historically functioned as a strategic security buffer for Iran," wrote Ali Akbar Vilayat, Iran's supreme leader's advisor on international affairs, on his social media account. According to the senior advisor to Iran's supreme leader, the Caucasus has played this role since the time of the Persian king of the Achaemenid dynasty, Cyrus the Great. He also stressed that according to the works of
That, of course, is a very, very long time ago. If I remember my dates correctly, it must be somewhere around 300 BC or so.
Greek historian and geographer Herodotus, Cyrus built a fortification in the Caucasus region to protect Iran from raids by nomadic tribes, thereby strengthening the region's enduring role as a defensive border. In an interview with Tessim on August 9, Vilayat rejected the idea of the so-called Zangezur Corridor, which is intended to connect Azerbaijan with Nakhchivan, warning that the implementation.
So there, is the Zangezur corridor. Okay, that's the area where the United States, where supposedly Armenia, and Azerbaijan have. I'm not sure the structure of the agreement, but it grants to the United States a lease of 99 years to build a road. So that would mean that a road that's built by the U.S. and supported by some armed forces of the U.S. would be right near the north-south transportation corridor, which the Iranians and the Russians are trying to build. Okay, so this is a threat to Iran. This is a threat to Russia. Iran is making statements like, well, we have to wait for evidence, to see whether this is somehow has anything to do with Azerbaijan playing, some funny games. But there was pressure, on the, there was a lot of pressure placed, on the Armenians, to conclude this agreement by the Azerbaijanis, and by the United States. Now, the agreement has not been finalized. It has to go to the legislature. Inside of Armenia, they have to approve it, before it takes effect. Okay.
Of the corridor plan would threaten the security of the South Caucasus. He also stressed that Iran will hinder the creation of an American corridor in the Caucasus region, regardless of whether Moscow joins Tehran or not. On August 2nd, as the White House hosted a peace signing ceremony between Armenia.
Okay, I'm going to end this here, but basically the point is the Iranians, for their part, are saying no to the road in the corridor. The Armenians also have said to Iran that there's no need, for the Iranians to worry, because the road will always be controlled by the Iranians, in spite of the fact that a lease, is being given to the United States this sounds very, very fishy to me. Okay, but I'm going to close, this particular video right now, and I'm going to go on to the next one. Because now, okay, I want to get to the reaction, okay, of Russia. So let me see that I have the right video. I think I do, that this is the right video. So let me share it. Let me share the screen for this one. Let me see where I'm starting. Okay.
Try this
Sorry.
weird 30-second technique to restore healthy sugar levels. Most people continue to take blood sugar.
Erdogan is in shock. Aliyev is silent. Azerbaijan has staked on a forceful scenario to break with Moscow on the Turkish support and has found itself in a trap. Everything that Baku had counted on was nullified overnight. No war, no invasions, no mobilizations. Moscow simply came to the table of global geopolitics and made a move that crossed out a decade of efforts by Turkey, the US, the EU and Aliyev himself. At the meeting between Putin and Trump in Alaska, far from all the usual diplomatic platforms, a fat cross was put on the main project of Ankara and Baku on the Zengezur corridor. It will never take place, in any form. This was said out loud, harshly, coldly. And from that moment on, the entire landscape of the South Caucasus changed. This was not just a refusal, it was an ultimatum. Moscow made it clear that there would be no attempts to build a transport corridor through Armenia. No matter what flags and pretexts they went under, they will not be accepted. This was not just a political gesture, it was a strategic calculation.
Okay, so the Iranians said no, they weren't going to allow it. And the Russians came in later. Putin said very clearly no, that he wasn't going to allow it. So both of the regional powers in that region, Russia, of course, and Iran, have said no. Let's go on with this and get the amplification of the no.
Russian Federation has made it clear that it will not allow either Turkey or the West to gain a foothold in the region. All key issues regarding the South Caucasus are now decided in the Kremlin, not in Brussels, not in Washington, and certainly not in Ankara. And this is where real panic began. Baku is in shock. Aliyev's long-term plan, built step by step after the Second Karabakh War, is failing. He was counting on Turkish support, on Western loyalty, on Russia's weakness, drawn into the Ukrainian conflict. It seemed to him that Moscow would not be able to respond, would not have time, would not want to. He was wrong. Fatally wrong. Today, silence reigns in his administration. The press service, which used to love loud statements and geopolitical gestures, has suddenly fallen silent.
They knew this day was coming, a drone so advanced, so dangerously affordable, that the government started whispering about pulling.
No comments, no statements, only a deafening silence in Yerevan. A different kind of panic. Pashinyan was reminded who is the boss in the region. His European rhetoric, his dreams of rapprochement with Brussels, his flirting with Washington, all of this is now turning to ashes. He has found himself in a...
So I want to make clear here. Aliyev is the president of Azerbaijan. Pashinyan, is the president, of Armenia. So those are the two principles here. The really ambitious one is Aliyev. He's the one who's been throwing his weight around, supporting Israel, trying to make alliances with the United States and with Turkey. Trying somehow to grow his country into a major power. I believe their population is roughly 11 million. I think Armenia has maybe 4 to 6 million. They're small countries sandwiched between a great power and a regional power. And they're trying to do something that's in the interests of the regional power and the great power. Okay.
Dead end. Closed meetings are rumored to be taking place in a hysterical atmosphere. The Armenian Prime Minister cannot find the words to explain why he will have to return to the Russian orbit again. And this is not just shameful for him as a politician. This means the end of his entire foreign policy concept of recent years. Europe will not come, the US will not intervene, NATO will not save, only Russia. And either.
So, what did Putin do to enforce the statements? What he did is he stopped the movement of trucks, okay, that were exporting Armenian fruit into Russia. He used the technicality, inspections, standards. There are photos of huge lines of trucks waiting to get into Russia. The Armenian fruit is spoiling. The agricultural industry is extremely fragile. Basically, he's threatening, the Armenians with the collapse of agriculture, in Armenia. He didn't make any statements to that effect. He's acting very, very quietly, but he stopped the export of fruit. Tacitly, what he's saying, to the Armenians is, don't approve the agreement, over the corridor. Don't allow the lease to the United States to take place. If you do, your country is going to be thrown into a depression. The agricultural sector is going to collapse because we won't allow the fruit to get to market. So Putin has already taken that action without actually saying anything.
You agree, or you lose everything. But this blow was perceived most painfully in Turkey, because the Zangezur corridor was not just a project, it was a flag, a sign of influence, a symbol of a new pan-Turanianism, proof that Turkey is capable of dictating terms in the post-Soviet space. And now all this is turning into a pile of rubble. Putin did not just reject the project, he destroyed all the logic behind it, and did it so easily and publicly that Ankara found itself in an extremely vulnerable position. Erdogan is furiously trying to save face. Ankara is making statements about new routes, about developing alternative directions, but this is just a smokescreen. Turkey's entire diplomatic machine was working to push through Zangezur, and now that everything has fallen through, they have to urgently look for excuses. But the main thing is that no one believes it anymore. Even within Turkey itself, questions are being asked. How could this happen? How did we end up on the outskirts of history again? Putin did not raise his voice, he did not threaten, he did not resort to blackmail. He simply explained that there would be no corridor, because any transport connection that third countries can stand behind is no longer logistics, it is military and political control. And Russia will not allow such a scenario, either now or later, never. And at that moment, according to eyewitnesses, even Trump, who is used to dominating in any situation, fell silent. His manner of joking, diffusing the atmosphere, playing to the crowd disappeared. He listened and nodded. What does this scene mean? It's simple. The US has left the game not in the sense of a complete withdrawal, but in the sense of control over the process. Trump understood that if you play big, you need to negotiate, and an agreement is possible only on Russian terms. That is why Washington accepted Putin's rules so quickly. Phrases about Trump having achieved responsibility from Putin, that the US has avoided a conflict, are already appearing in American rhetoric. In reality, everything is different. Russia has achieved the abandonment of a project that threatened its positions, and Washington has accepted it. For Brussels, this is a disaster. The European Union built its system of influence in the region through grants, missions, promises of democratic reforms. But when the time came to make real decisions, Europe turned out to be an extra. Brussels is now debating whether to recognize the results of these negotiations, pretend that nothing happened, or openly protest. But no one knows how. Everyone understands.
So what did Russia do to Azerbaijan? We don't exactly know, but we do know this, that all of a sudden, within a matter of weeks, the supplies of agriculture inside, of Azerbaijan grew very, very large, and the agricultural market for the products of the farmers, of Azerbaijan, at the bottom, has dropped out. So the price of the agricultural goods inside, of Azerbaijan has dropped by 60%. The farmers in Azerbaijan are threatened with bankruptcy due to this. The agricultural economy is in ruins. If the situation continues to exist for many more weeks, then the farmers are going out of business. They're going to stop production in Azerbaijan. No one knows why the supplies spiked up in that way, but imports from Iran and from Russia very, very quickly increased, and the competition for the farmers, of Azerbaijan was such, that the market collapsed. We don't know, who's doing who is making the supplies actually spike. We don't know if the orders came from Putin or Iran, or both. But the economies of Azerbaijan, and Armenia, both are under severe attack. So the great powers in the are telling the two small countries to stop it. Stop opening the door to the West. We don't want the United States in here. We're not going to allow it. That is what is going on. There's no military action yet, but the economic is very severe for both of those countries at this point. Now the Iranians at the same time are holding out a friendly hand. Pezeshkian was inside of Armenia a few days ago, and the Armenians and the Iranians signed comprehensive agreements across infrastructure, in the realm of agriculture, the realm of energy, in all sorts of areas. They made agreements. Okay, they made agreements for trade to increase, I believe, from 3 billion to 6 billion. Okay, so Iranians, were holding out a friendly hand. But at the same time, they were taking action to pressure the Armenians to stop the deal, with the United States. So going on.
Stands that the move has already been made, and the EU has neither the strength nor the will to counter it. The main conclusion from the Alaska meeting: the South Caucasus is again under Moscow's control. This is not just a geopolitical success. This is a demonstration of force. A demonstration that Russia is capable of regaining its zones of influence not with weapons, but with will and strategy. Without military action, without losses, without loud headlines. One conversation and half the world changes plans. Yerevan, Baku, Ankara, Brussels. All this is now a secondary front, Moscow in chief. All key routes, both economic and political, again pass through the Kremlin. And this is not a metaphor. This is a reality formalized by the results of the Alaska talks. From now on, every decision related to the Caucasus will be made only with Russia's approval. This threatens Pashinyan's downfall. His allies in Europe, his reforms, his play at being a Western liberal are now just a pretext for ridicule. He promised that Armenia would break free from Moscow's influence. In the end, it returns to where it always was, only now not by its own will, but because there are no other options.
Have you ever wondered how buying Israeli goods helps Israel during turbulent times with the
And this painful realization is only just beginning to reach Armenian society. Aliyev is faced with the most difficult decision in recent years. Or does he continue to resist, exacerbating relations with the Kremlin and risking domestic stability? Or does he take a step back and turn defeat into a new strategy? Most likely, he will choose the latter, because Azerbaijan's economy is too dependent on Russia, because the diaspora in Russia is too influential, because everything else is a zero-sum game. Turkey is left with nothing. Erdogan may try to strengthen his presence in Central Asia, launch new transport projects, but the fact remains. Zangezur is dead, and with it Ankara's ambitions to create a land corridor to the Turkic world. The Kremlin has made it clear that this is taboo, and any new move in this direction will be met harshly, perhaps even harsher than now. Erdogan found himself in the position of a man who invested billions in a ship, and it sank off the coast. He was building the Zangezur corridor not just as an infrastructure project. It was supposed to be a symbol of a new Turkey, ambitious, great, connecting the Turkic peoples, from Anatolia to Sind. Instead, it was a diplomatic blow to the heart. The Kremlin destroyed all of Ankara's plans with one sentence. And the worst thing was that it happened publicly, in front of witnesses, in the presence of the American president. For Erdogan, this is humiliation. For Moscow, it is a consolidation of status. Of course, Turkish diplomacy will be tossing and turning. Of course, there will be statements about new directions, new corridors, plans to bypass.
Okay, so I'm going to stop it there, but I've given the essence of it, of what has been going on there, how the Iranians responded, how the Russians, have answered. And okay, it's very decisive. The plans of Azerbaijan, the plans of Armenia for the Zangezur corridor are now gone. Nothing will stand in the way of the north-south transportation corridor that the Iranians and the Russians are trying to build. So let us go to your comments at this point. So where are we? Steve Wolfbrand says, subscribe and like. Thank you, Steve. Mr. Wonderful says, Steve Wolfbrand, cheers. Antonio Calhow. Hi, Antonio says, Azerbaijan is rich in oil and gas and is an important pipeline hub. Yes, it is, but it's no longer going to be able to act in ways that run counter to the interests of Iran, and Moscow. It's going to have to get in line right now. So let's go to the next topic. Have you any comments, Dee?
No.
Do you like that treatment of what was going on in the Caucasus?
I basically had the dogs barking here a lot, so I couldn't really.
Oh, okay. Okay, the dogs. Okay, so we'll go on to the next topic, which is the Oreshniks.
Then what are you doing to keep it in play? Where are the
Okay, Scott Ritter once again. Let me see. He was asked a question at the start of which by Danny.
My boss thought I worked all weekend, but I just stopped using ChatGPT like a toy and do this instead.
Let's be real. Most
by either the US and NATO, with both showing and demonstrating that they are committed to escalating these short and medium range missiles. Then we also have this ongoing saga where Donald Trump, in a spat with Dmitry Medvedev on X, said that he was ready for nuclear war. Here is what he said.
When you talk about nuclear, we have to be prepared, and we're totally prepared.
You have been on the show many times sounding the alarm about the dangers of nuclear conflict between the United States and Russia. So where are we now, given Russia's latest announcement on the end of its own self-imposed INF treaty?
Well, let's first of all keep in mind that it was Donald Trump that pulled out of the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty in
2018. 2018. Right?
So here we are. We're celebrating the 7th anniversary of that stupidity. The Russians, reciprocated. But what the Russians said is that we will continue to abide by the INF treaty in terms of systems so long as the United States doesn't deploy INF capable systems to Europe. The United States did deploy a INF capable system. It's a containerized system that can shoot both the SM-3 SM-6 missile, the SM-6 variant known as the Typhoon, which would be a short-range missile in the surface-to-surface mode, but also the same containerized system, a derivative of the Mark 41 Aegis Ashore system, can shoot the Tomahawk. And there's no way of knowing what missile is loaded in the container system at the time. So we deployed it to Denmark, I believe, part of a NATO exercise. We claimed that it only had the SM-6 loaded up, but doesn't matter. The Russians went, we will now begin to.
So in other words, what we do is, we play games. Okay, we put in a platform, container-like platform, and we say, hey, we're shooting short-range missiles out of that. But Russia knows very, very well that we couldn't put in some IRBMs in that container, as well. Do they think the Russians are stupid? That they don't know what's going on? I mean, this is provocative.
Actively, do the R&D necessary to produce our missiles, and they began the production of something called the Oreshnik missile, And in November of 2024, Russia actually did an operational test of the Oreshnik, striking the Dnipro factory in Dnipropetrovsk, Ukraine. What we see happening now is simply the fact that the Russians have gone to serial production of the Oreshnik, and so now instead of having a handful of handmade missiles produced to do testing, they've gone into serial production, and they are producing missiles that are going out into the field, into operational units, and they have deployed the first operational units armed with Oreshnik missiles. When you deploy a system like the Oreshnik, it's deployed at the regimental level, meaning that you'll put a regiment. That means they have 3 battalions. Each battalion has 3 launchers. So we're talking 9 Oreshnik missile launchers minimum, already deployed at an operating base somewhere in Russia. Belarus has announced that it will be receiving the Oreshnik system by year's end, I believe. And so Belarus will also have a regiment of 9 missiles. They're getting 10 launchers because they're going to have their own training facility to train up the Belarusian troops. But the Oreshnik is produced at the Vodkinsk machine building plant. It's an SS-20 analog. The SS-20 is an intermediate range missile that was eliminated during the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty. Something I was.
So Scott knows the technical details of all of this, which he's giving now. Obviously, he knows the detail very, very well.
Involved in. At that time, we estimated that the Russians or the Soviets could produce.
This is horrible. Missing teeth causes a range of different problems.
60 to 80 SS-20 type missiles a year. That was in peacetime Cold War production. Now the Oreshnik is being produced in a quasi wartime with real world operational requirements. So my guess is that the Russians could probably up that production, to around 100 or so Oreshniks a year. If it's 9.
Okay, I have to say here, I've heard or read somewhere that the number of Oreshniks they have by now actually totals 300 Oreshniks. That doesn't square, with Scott's estimate here. Scott is very good at estimates. Okay, but there is that figure, floating around that they already have 300 of them.
Oreshniks per regiment. We're talking about the Russians, and there'll be a reload capability here. Plus, the Oreshnik will be configured both for conventional and nuclear capabilities. So, let's say 59, 45. We're talking about the Russians being able to field before year's end, probably in the area of 4 to 5 regiments, a couple divisions worth of Oreshniks, and then they're just going to keep producing them. And this is a game changer. It fundamentally alters the strategic balance of power in Europe. There's nothing the United States or NATO has that can counter this, both in terms of its conventional strike, which is a new capability. The SS-20 was not a conventional system; it was purely a nuclear system, and in its nuclear mode, it just changed the way it put all of Europe at risk. I mean, this is the thing. Medvedev's tweet basically said, "Europe, you committed suicide." Because now you guaranteed any future conflict will ensure the destruction of all your beautiful cathedral spires. It's the end of Europe if they want to go to war. The Oreshnik literally guarantees the destruction, physical destruction of Europe in the case of a nuclear war. And the fact that Europe will not be able to ride out a conventional war without suffering immense damage. There's nothing in the world today that can intercept an Oreshnik missile. And so this is absolutely a game changer. Does it destabilize Europe? I actually think in this case, at this point in time, brings about stability because Europe's going insane, literally going insane in terms of their anti-Russian rhetoric and things of this nature. There's nothing Europe can do to match the Oreshnik, and there's nothing the United States can do at the moment to match the Oreshnik. United States is seeking to deploy what they call the Dark Eagle, a intermediate range hypersonic missile. It was supposed to be deployed last year, but we don't know how to build it. And so we have yet to operationally field this system. They're talking about maybe sometime in 2026 getting the Dark Eagle up there. But an interesting thing about Medvedev's tweet, it's not just about the Oreshnik. He said that, and other systems. The Oreshnik is a derivative of what's called the RS-26 Rubyezh, which was a missile that the Russians had under development, but it ran into problems because of the INF Treaty. The Rubyezh, deployed with a certain warhead configuration, could be flown to ranges below intermediate range thresholds set by the treaty. But the problem is, if you put on a different warhead configuration, it could be flown to ranges greater. And once a missile's flown to ranges greater, it becomes an intermediate range missile as defined by the treaty. And the Russians didn't want to be seen as crossing over that threshold, so they put the deployment of the Rubyezh on hold. But the Rubyezh is, again, an SS-20 analog. It's a missile that was developed to fill the gap that was created in Russian strategic capabilities when the SS-20 was eliminated. What a lot of people don't realize during that time is that the Russians had built another missile called the Skorost missile. This was another intermediate range missile. It was built specifically for the Pershing II problem set, meaning that now when Pershing IIs, which are an intermediate range missile of the United States, deployed to West Germany, if the Pershing II went out of its, garrison and went into, an operational mode, the Russians didn't have anything that could immediately strike. Skorost means quick. And so the Skorost system was a system that was built to quickly respond to operational deployments of the Pershing II, so that if Russian intelligence, Soviet intelligence detected the Pershing II leaving its place, Skorost could be fired and terminate the Pershing II's existence before it could fire. The reason why I bring this up is that the Oreshnik is not the system to counter Dark Eagle. There will have to be a Skorost type analog produced to counter the Dark Eagle, so that when the Dark Eagle is deployed to Europe, if it goes to an operational place, there will be a new Russian system. And this is what Medvedev has alluded to. And I believe it's something I've been saying all along, that, the Russians will fall back on Soviet doctrine and Soviet, operational requirements set by the capabilities of NATO and the United States. And if we deploy Dark Eagle, there will be a new missile. It'll be the analog of Skorost. I don't know what they're going to call it. This is, again, game changer. It's checkmate in favor of Russia. People need to understand now that the Russians have dominance across the totality of the battlefield. I don't know if you saw Ukrainian drone operators do a post on Telegram, I think a couple weeks ago, where they mocked NATO. They said, we're getting our asses handed to us by the Russians, who have mastered drone warfare. They hunt us down and kill us before we can launch our drones now. The Ukrainians were doing pretty well in drone warfare, but now as soon as they deploy, the Russians have done pattern of life analysis of how the Ukrainian drones operate. And the second they go operational, the Russians are killing them, slaughtering them. This is why the Russians are making the progress they are in Pokrovsk and Sumy and elsewhere, where they used to be stopped cold by Ukrainian drones. They now just power right on through. And the Ukrainian drone operators got up and said, NATO needs to understand that a NATO-style army going up against the Russians will be dead in a matter of days, destroyed, totally destroyed. And that's just using drones. Now we throw in the Russian supremacy in the missile field. And they already had it with the Iskander, the Iskander-M, the Iskander-K, the Caliber, the Kinzhal. But now we throw in the Oreshnik, which will destroy every command and control center, every major logistical center throughout Europe. None will exist when the war starts. There will be no railheads. There will be nothing. It's all gone. Conventional Oreshniks will take it out. And then you throw in the Skorost, will take out the Dark Eagle and the other analog out there, including air bases. The Russians now are, in the, ability to totally mobilize their defense industry. They will produce missiles in the hundreds. They were producing 70 Iskanders a year. They're now producing 700. This is a game, set, match, Russia. How's the United States respond? Well, we sent nuclear weapons to England, B-61 12 bombs. Understand that the Oreshnik will take them out too, along with all the other nuclear storage facilities. And then there's, Medvedev's famous or infamous, mean tweet. His mean tweet didn't say anything outrageous.
So this is all very sobering. And Scott goes through this, and he outlines the ways in which the Russian resources are dominant in terms of every phase of the battlefield. I mean, it's really awesome stuff, and we don't have anything in the works to counter it. And we haven't done anything to build up the manufacturing capability to produce our missiles in the kind of quantity which the Russians can produce their missiles in. So it would be simply devastating in any war.
It simply was a response to the stupidity of Lindsey Graham and others who threatened Russia with preemptive strikes. Basically saying, if you Russians don't continue this, we know how to do this. Ask the Ayatollah. It was basically a threat of, decapitation strike, first strike by the United States. And all Medvedev did is say, and we got the dead hand. The dead hand is a Cold War system known as perimeter. It's real, even though Medvedev said if it exists, it exists. I know. I inspected at least 3 of the missiles that are associated with this system back in 1990. Those were SS-25, since then upgraded to SS-27 variants. Without getting too much detail on it, if we attempted a preemptive strike and it succeeded, let's say we killed Putin and Medvedev and everybody, blew out their command and control and all that, and we tried to take out their nukes. The perimeter has sensors all over Russia, detect radiation, detect seismic waves, and they monitor communications. And when you get a radiation detection, seismic detection, and communications no longer function, then the dead hand kicks in. These missiles that I talked about are launched. They have a broadcast capability. They don't carry warheads. They'll put out the launch codes, and everything in the Russian arsenal gets launched immediately to the United States, and the United States ceases to exist. That's the dead hand. And all Medvedev said is, you want to talk about preemptively striking us? We got the dead hand, and you'll turn into the walking dead. Trump apparently didn't understand that, because he does nuclear better than anybody. And he threatened to, or he said, I'm going to deploy Trident-capable Ohio-class submarines. Here's the interesting thing, and I'll leave it at this. This is why it's so dangerous. The dead hand was conceived in the late 70s, fielded in the early 1980s, out of a fear that the Pershing II / Ohio class / Trident capability gave the United States real preemptive first strike decapitation capability, especially if the Trident submarine comes close to Russian shores, Soviet shores, and fires the Tridents in a reduced trajectory, which eliminates being detected by long-range radars and provides shorter flight times. And that's why they built it. They built it because of the Trident. They built the dead hand because of the Trident, because of the fear the United States would put Ohio-class submarines near the shores and fire the Trident. So what did the president do? The president ordered 2 Ohio-class submarines to move closer to Russian shores. Now the Russian radars are going off all over the place. Russia isn't looking for a nuclear war, but Russia is not going to sit back and let the United States, carry out a preemptive strike. Now the Russian alert levels have gone up. Last fall, the CIA assessment was that there was a greater than 50% chance of having a nuclear war before year's end. We talked about this last year. I'm one of the few guys that actually knows this shit inside and out. And back then I said there's a greater than 50%. The CIA happened to agree with me. And we were very close to a nuclear war last fall. We avoided it, thankfully. It's even worse today. And it's going to get worse. We have the New START treaty that expires in February. When that's gone, there is no limitation. We will see the nuclear arsenals of both countries skyrocket as they pull out nuclear warheads in reserve. Right now, the treaty allows 1,550 operational systems, but there are thousands of warheads in reserve. And some of the ways that we've dropped our operational system is that, for instance, we take the Minuteman III missile and we make it a single warhead. But we've already exercised putting multiple warheads. We've already done it. The United States military has gone in and put multiple warheads on Minuteman III as a test of capability. We can do the same thing with the Trident. We lowered the warheads. We can increase the warheads. Overnight, if this treaty goes away, we will go from 1,550 to over 4,000 deployed nuclear warheads overnight. And the Russians can do the same thing. And this thing will then escalate out of control till we're talking about 20 to 30 nuclear warheads per side at a time when we have an idiot president moving to. This is a recipe for disaster. I mean, can it be avoided? I don't know. I hope. I mean, Donald Trump actually told a TASS correspondent on July 29th that he can't imagine allowing New START treaty to expire. He said, these are the kinds of things we don't allow to expire. Then what are you doing to keep it in play? Where are the negotiations? They're not happening. What's happening is the president's mouth is running away, and we're in an extraordinary dangerous situation. Anyway, that's a long answer to a short question. I'm sorry. I'll turn it over to Larry.
Okay, so that's it. We're in terrible danger at this point. We need these treaties to be reached. We need agreements to get out of using these weapons, to make sure the escalation that Scott has talked about does not become a reality. If the agreements are not in place by spring of next year, we're in very, very deep trouble, because things will be able to go off at any time. The escalation of these weapons is going to be horrible. The possibilities of accident are going to be far greater. And the United States and Russia have not even begun to work on these treaties yet. Now, Trump seems to be interested in a new security framework. If so, that's good. If he can move on it, that's good. But just as the Russians have to end the war in Ukraine quickly now, Trump has to end his involvement with Europe very quickly also, and turn to negotiating arms control treaties with Russia, and have them done by the spring of next year. It's already nearly September. We got to move on this issue. More comments. Wayne Santelbutton's here. What about if not solved with Putin and Oreshnik being used? It's going to be goodbye, Europe. It's going to be goodbye, Europe. And we'll be lucky if it doesn't, get to be, goodbye, U.S. Early today, Red had a debate with someone very pro-Ukraine on a channel, the Marion Newfall channel. And he had a poll as to who was winning the debate. Ritter dominated the vote. Well, that's very good. Now, I'm not a subscriber to this Newfall guy, but I checked it out and made the comment that Russia's SMO equals R2P. It was then when the channel changed, the commenters, required to be subscribed. Of course, I did not subscribe to the Mario Newfall channel because it was evident to me he was pro-Ukrainian and not moderating as a moderator and trying to host Ritter so he could smear him. Yeah, but he can't smear him because Scott's too good. Even it says, Trump, hoping to get credit for achieving a peace between Azerbaijan and Armenia, and at the same time securing a 99-year lease of a corridor for the U.S. Apparently, that possibility is now gone, plus a chance for Turkey to benefit by default also failing. Yeah, apparently that stuff is now gone. Every time I see these pro-Ukrainian channels hosting a live stream in my YouTube feed, even though I'm not subscribed, I go debunk them and instantly get blocked, kicked from the channel. Yeah, they all believe in free speech. Evelina says, as long as Oreshniks exist, there's no need to worry about the radiation, right? As long as the Russians, do not mount any nuclear weapons onto the warheads of the Oreshniks, but they can do that. As long as they keep using the conventional warheads, that's fine. But they can be nuclear capable. Also, the Oreshniks, one missile, one of the warheads, of the Oreshniks, the warheads emerged, so they split in midair, and I believe that 6 of the submodules go on independent hypersonic paths. So if you have let's say 9 Oreshniks, you've really got 56 explosions to worry about. So the Oreshniks, each one can devastate a very wide area. So that's important to keep in mind. Please do share, like, and subscribe this. We're down only at 23 right now, and we should be up higher. So let's go to our next topic, and that topic is the topic, of myth, with respect to both Trump and Putin. Are they mythical characters? I'll now share a video from the judge and Alistair Crook, and they'll be discussing the mythic character of both individuals. I won't play the whole video.
Wanting to decapitate it, topple it.
Sorry, let me go back to the beginning here. There it is.
They don't believe how toxic this is. If you're still using a plastic or wooden cutting board, you need to hear this.
Sent you. Alistair, welcome here, my dear friend, and thank you for accommodating my schedule today. We all in the U.S. and you, people who watch these things, know that Donald Trump is not motivated by a set of values, a set of principles, but rather by his own, as you call it, robust, others call it maniacal sense of self-worth, his own extraordinary ego. Do the Russians understand this, and do they know how to deal with it?
Yes, I'd just like to explain a little bit to the audience what I mean by myth in this case, because I'm really talking about myth as geopolitics, not just myth as myth. This isn't a philosophical account. This is myth as geopolitics. And what I mean by that Trump is to a certain extent become mythic is in 2 categories. One is his extraordinary ability to dominate the discourse around the world, globally. Who is everyone talking about? Trump. He does this through the force of his personality, he claims. And that's why he does it. And you cannot any longer go on thinking of Trump as just being a standard political figure, a sort of, narcissistic politician of the kind which we see all the time. There is a quality that is different. For one thing, I mean, he has just, everything has been thrown at him. Any normal human being would be laid flat or gone off into retirement. He survives and comes back, and he comes back still invigorating. And of course, as you just said, I mean, he's in no way mythic in the old sort of sense of the word. He's an elderly, slightly infirm real estate oligarch with lowbrow tastes and an unusually robust ego. But Steve Witkoff has said, who's his long-standing friend, has often said that actually what is special about him, if you like, his magic, is his deep conviction in himself that it is his dominating, commanding presence alone that is capable of bending people to his will and states to America's interests. Witkoff, incidentally, agrees, concurs with the self-assessment completely.
They must stop giving conservatives this free gold Trump survivor coin. Start.
Carl Jung, and this is where I want to introduce Mrs. Geopolitics. Carl Jung, the psychiatrist in 1936, pointed out that when you have such signs of such extraordinary power over the collective minds of people, in the interwar era, this came boiling out, he claims, from the realms of myth and archetype. This is the driving force that allowed it to happen. For that era, not this one, but that era, Jung pointed to Wotan, who in myth is a restless wanderer, who creates unrest, stirs strife, now here, now there, but works magic.
Right.
Jung thought it piquant to a degree that an ancient god of storm and frenzy, German god of storm and frenzy, the long quiescent Wotan, should come to life in the German youth movement. And we know what that led to in the years that followed, his insight. The power of these deep psychic, quasi-forgotten imagery is repeating itself today. It has huge implications.
Is
And
this
that's why
is this an instructive comparison? And Jung was talking about Hitler. Is it instructive to compare Hitler's ability to control the masses with Trump's?
it's not the same, but it is dependent on using mythic imagery and digging deep into the psyche, in that case of the German people, in order to create that sort of control. But it's not I'm not suggesting that he is following Hitler in that way at all, but that they using the same way of envisaging it. And I'll explain a bit further. We know that Trump faces huge pressures. We know the Epstein affair, the Western security state narrative of we are winning, they are losing, that creates a dynamic for further war in Ukraine. But we do not understand, and this is where I come back to the present and myth of today. We do not understand perhaps the nature, the actual conditions of Israel's hold, what hold it has over Trump and his imagination. A hold that Trump seems impelled to normalize the genocide that is taking place there, within the Western sphere, to make it seem normal, to seem justified. The massacre of women and children taking place before our eyes. Qualms about this are quashed. We are not allowed to complain. We do, in effect, become complicit and indeed accountable for these acts nonetheless, because of their normalization into our societies. Bloodlust in Gaza has been awakened not by Wotan, not by Wotan, but instead by something quite different. Yossi Klein, who was writing in Haaretz, interestingly, only in the Hebrew version. I can't see it in the English language version. It's only in Hebrew. Haaretz says the old Zionism is over. It's gone. The next stage is messianic extreme nationalism. He's talking here about Israel, of course, only. The third stage will be, in his words, barbarism. Indeed, he says, barbarism is already here. Bloodlust in Gaza has been awakened from the ancient myths in the Torah by precisely these messianic nationalists.
I was going to.
This again is Klein speaking. There, the obligation to annihilate another nation, the Amalek, is mentioned twice. In Klein's words, in their eyes, fear of God is a license to kill.
I was going to take you from your view of.
That's awful, isn't it? Really, really awful to contemplate that.
It is. It's horrific, the whole thing.
Yes. I think it's a terrific interpretation of what is going on by Alistair. Very powerful.
Definitely powerful. And when you think about how we talked about this maybe last year or a few years ago when the Israeli administration came in, this new group, there was so much talk, and now we're seeing it put in a sense of actually happening.
Yes. I know, and it's just horrific. How it's happening. And I think it very plausible to characterize it as a bloodlust.
Definitely.
That's coming upon these people when they go in and they fire at the civilians. I mean, what else can you call it? When they go out, they're firing at women, they're firing at children, they're firing at people who are lining up for food. And they're just joyfully attacking them and killing them. I mean, what is wrong with these people?
That's what gets me. It gets me, and I try to think, as much as somebody is indoctrinated into something, how does it take you that far?
How does it take you that far? I mean, it's got to be bloodlust that's going on.
Trump as a self-made myth into the Russians and Alaska, but let's hold that for a minute since you have mentioned Israel. Senator Janine Shaheen, a liberal Democrat from New Hampshire, and Rahm Emanuel, a Jewish American, former chief of staff to President Obama, former mayor of the city of Chicago, both said virtually the same thing this weekend, and it was a sound condemnation of Israeli policy. We'll play them both for you. Chris, cut number 2 and then cut number 3.
The Israeli Prime Minister's office on Friday had a very harsh statement about the famine designation. They called it, quote, a modern blood libel spreading like wildfire through prejudice. That suggests this is about anti-Jewish hate rather than starvation. How do you make sense of the Israeli defense?
I don't think that's a good defense. The fact is, this is not about anti-Semitism, which I abhor, but the reality is we have people dying because they are systematically being starved to death, because Israel is refusing to allow in the humanitarian aid that people need to keep alive. Not only that, they're getting ready to do another, or they've already started planning another major incursion into Gaza in ways that are going to kill more people. So this is not acceptable. The world needs to speak out.
This is a product of the fact that he was, Prime Minister Netanyahu was told in the early days of the war, you better have a day after plan. And now there is no day after plan, and there's chaos there. And there is an issue as access to food, and there is hunger. There is famine. It's a war zone. Second is, we're coming on the 2-year anniversary. There's also coming on, in 30 days from now, Rosh Hashanah. And I think the Israeli government, as they send their delegation to Cairo to negotiate, has to make a decision. Will these young men, mainly men, who are taken hostage, spend the Jewish holiday, the second year in a row, in a tunnel or in a temple? Will they be with their captors or be with their community? And it is incumbent upon the government in Israel to choose a temple over a tunnel. The IDF says it, the Israeli public says it, and the parents of these children say it. And this is a product, in my view, of a prime minister who refused to make the political strategic decisions in which he has degraded the Hamas, destroyed their capability, but doesn't have a plan for what to do next.
Why has no one told you that memory loss can be reversed without expensive medications? They just don't know.
Okay, I think that view of Ram's is wrong about, the degradation, of Hamas as a fighting force. They recruited new people, and by all accounts, their fighting force is larger than ever, and they are handing their butts to the Israeli soldiers who have come in to go at them again.
Exactly. I read that also.
Yes. So I think that Ram is wrong about that. But he is right that had Netanyahu had no plan except for ethnic cleansing, and extermination. There was no day after plan, other than that.
Netanyahu have any interest in making a deal to release the hostages, or is his steadfast goal the utter genocide, destruction, or removal of all Palestinians from the Gaza Strip, no matter what the public reaction might be?
Well, he does, and he has a positive public reaction within Israel. But I wanted just to say that, we have to, look on this also without a sort of superiority to it. James Hillman, in his book, A Terrible Love of War, attempted to address bloodlust, an impulse so terrible, yet one that ignites a Mars-like fury that bonds men in battle. I felt like a god, says General Patton in the eponymous film. The general walks the field after a battle, churned earth, burnt tanks, dead men. He takes up a dying officer, kisses him, surveys the havoc and says, I love it. God help me. I do love it so. I love it more than life. So we have to, I'm just saying this to underline more than anything, the power of these sort of myths in creating these lusts for killing and for it. Not justifying it, I'm just explaining that simply societies have found and continue to find meaning in life through war.
Well,
Israel is doing this somehow to find meaning from its biblical roots, its myths from the biblical in the churn desolation that it is visited in Gaza. But this is a profoundly dangerous impulse that is seizing not only Israel, but is now affecting and turning much of the Middle East to desert. But these dark impulses, psychic impulses, once awakened, easily replicate, because not only have we normalized genocide, but Washington today enthuses over decapitation strikes. Lebanon, Syria, Iran, assassinations find their justification. and model gold exploding pages and cell phones are thought to be a cool gift to give to a president. This is how it spreads. This is how it sort of moves and moves on elsewhere. And there are other deep psychic impulses that seem dangerously close to awakening. One prominent member of Trump's close circle, Peter Thiel, is due to give a series of 4 lectures next month on the role of the catechon as somehow a bulwark against something far worse, the Antichrist. This, no doubt, will be a biblical explanation, but clearly the ancient but still potent image of the Antichrist is now in the air. This is what Macron had to say, quote, exactly. Putin has been a constant destabilizing force, he said. Russia has become a threat to many, including us. Now listen to this. It has to eat to survive. So he's a predator. That's Putin. A threat to many, including us. A cannibal at our doorstep. I'm not saying that France will be attacked tomorrow, but Putin is a threat to Europeans.
Oh my goodness.
Let's not be naive. Well, there it is. The imagery evoked of the beast at the door, the cannibal needing to eat.
I'm thinking
It's
of
very clear.
I'm thinking of William Butler Yeats. One rough beast slouching toward Bethlehem. I think I've quoted that properly. You stirred something I had to memorize in high school in my brain. But back to what you just said from Macron. Here's the American version of this. Here's Lindsey Graham last week saying we must crush Russia. Chris, cut number 4.
Putin fears Trump, and he's been I think he's been tough. And my advice to President Trump and Marco is if you got to convince Putin that if this war doesn't end justly and honorably, with Ukraine making concessions also, we're going to destroy the Russian economy. We have the ability to do it. To Europe, why don't you put tariffs on India for buying Russian oil? To Europe, why don't you threaten China with tariffs for being the largest purchaser of Russian oil? To Europe, you can do more. If Europe and the United States banded together and we told Russia that if this war does not come to an end, we're going to destroy your fossil fuel economy, this war would come to an end. I think we have the ability to crush the Russian economy through putting tariffs on people who buy Russian oil and gas, buying cheap oil to prop up his war machine. And I intend to push that until I can't push anymore.
Well, I really don't think he knows what he's talking about, but he does manifest this neocon belligerence and hatred toward and fear of Russia, articulated more potently by the quote you just cited from French President Macron.
Well, you asked me a little earlier, what about the Russian view of all of this? And what I think Putin at Anchorage, seemingly he understood the psychology that underlies Trump and paid attention to the psychology and the sudden request to meet with him. The Russians treated Trump in a very respectful, courteous, and friendly fashion, despite all of the comments that come out of Washington and from Europe. I mean, some of them extremely ugly, like the ones from Macron. Less noticed, perhaps, but psychologically crucial, is that Trump seemed to recognize in Putin a fellow from the pantheon of putative, mythic leaders, also a Polonian, perhaps, rather than Diocenes for Trump. Yet how striking, unlike it was, the treatment of Putin by Trump and also Putin's treatment of Trump, to Trump's completely disdainful treatment of the Euros, treating them like sniveling children. I just want to sort of conclude on that part and say, really judge any awakening of these Manichaean depths, such as I've just described, and be more potent even than the cold possession of nuclear weapons, more dangerous. Moscow perhaps understands them better than many may think.
Okay, so I think that's it. Yeah, that's the part of the video that I wanted to play. I don't know that I am moved so much by the mythical characteristics of Trump or by the mythical characteristics of Putin, but they may be motivated by what they see as mythical characteristics in each other. And that may be a part or an important element of how they deal with each other. Anyway, I thought this interpretation of Alistair's was very, very interesting, and I wanted to bring it to you for contemplation. I think it's quite important, at least, to think about, and how it relates to the idea of bloodlust as a motivating factor for the Israelis in the genocide is very, very important also. So, I'll go to your comments once again. Evelina says, Oreshniks with conventional warheads are so daunting in and of themselves, they may just disincentive the need to load them with nukes. Let us hope. Yes, I feel that way too. Lest, of course, the U.S. activates Russia's dead hand mechanism. Yes. But that is a hypothetical long shot. Maybe for now, maybe not so much if they don't conclude any treaties and we're into the spring of next year. Evelina says, ultimately more fearful of climate change than radiation to do us in. Well, if the radiation comes, it'll do us in much more quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Especially with psychopaths in high places that will use climate catastrophe as a weapon of war. I agree with this. Mr. Wonderful says there a Glenn Deason YouTube video titled Alex Craner, Europe's economic apocalypse has arrived. In that video, Alex explains how Europe has ruined itself and has no choice but to continue the war. I don't know about that. I think Europe does have a choice. They've talked themselves into the idea that they have no choice but to continue the war. I think they have a number of different choices open to them, including, getting rid of the EU. I think they really need to either get rid of the EU or go the whole way to a government that is a monetary sovereign. I think that is very, very important and holds within it the seeds of change. I think that Europe could mobilize itself. I think they could change. I think they could begin to, decide to trade with Putin again. I think he'd be very open to trade if they wanted to do it, and even to send them the oil they need. But that's another subject. We still have two of our topics for tonight to handle. The next one is Iran's defensive actions. I'll share the screen for the next video, which is on just that subject.
And it looks like the Iranian.
This is a video from the Duran. Alex Christoforou is questioning, Alexander Mercouris, and they're talking about the way Iran is building up their air defenses for a future conflict with Israel. So here we go for that one. It's a relatively short video, Okay, only 11 minutes. We will take a little longer time to do commentary on it.
Have used the summer to get closer to get closer to Russia, at least from a military preparation standpoint, and they definitely seem to be having many meetings. Military officials from Iran seem to be having various meetings with military personnel officials in Russia, most likely in order to build up their defenses and to work with the Russians to build up their defenses in anticipation of another round of conflicts with Israel and the United States. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think that's absolutely right. Now, because there's been so much focus on the Ukraine situation over the last few weeks, the attention has shifted away from Iran. And I think that's probably a mistake, because the Iranians have been saying quite openly, Pezeshkian, for example, has been saying quite openly that they do expect the fighting, the conflict between themselves and Israel to resume fairly soon. And they've been talking, they've been sort of signaling that it might even happen this year. So they are taking steps.
Some people have been saying it will happen in September. I think Alexander is being conservative in putting the time frame as this year.
Yeah. Yes, a lot of people have been saying September.
A lot of people have been saying September, but Alexander may be right, because I think in the intervening time between the 12-day war and what is going on now, there have been occasional hits on Israel, by the Iranians in retaliation for some things the Israelis have done, to Gaza. And those have been fairly devastating hits. And of course, I think Ansarallah, the Houthis, have continued to hit Israel on a daily basis for what they're doing in Gaza. And a lot of those hits have been very devastating for Israel, including a hit on the the Nevatim air base, which is supposed to have destroyed a considerable number of Israeli jets. If that's the truth, then Israel might have to wait for more jets before it's ready to attack again. And I'm sure the United States does not presently have a lot of jets to send them. So they may have to wait for things to, come off the assembly line before they feel confident in attacking Iran again. On the other hand, Iran may launch a preemptive attack itself.
To prepare for that, they had a meeting with the IAEA, in which they again made it absolutely clear to the IAEA that they are not welcome in Iran, examine Iranian nuclear facilities. They recommitted themselves to their enrichment program, and they seem to be taking other steps as well. So firstly, they have carried out a major reorganization of their defense and security structures, which during the Israeli attack on Iran proved to be overcomplicated, as many people have said, and disorganized. So they've now created a proper defense council, which apparently consists of a small number of people whose task it is to organize and run the defense systems in Iran. And that's clearly a war council that's been assigned to prepare for war. Now, Khamenei, that is the supreme leader's security advisor, national security advisor, the supreme leader's national security advisor, a man called Ali Larijani, a very, very experienced Iranian diplomat and negotiator. Last month, he went to Moscow and he had a meeting there with Putin. The Russians have not provided a detailed readout about the meeting. And it was only afterwards from Iranian sources that we learned that Larijani actually came to Moscow with the Iranian defense minister. The Iranian defense minister had meetings with the Russian defense ministry. And the Iranian defense minister, it turns out, was also present when
I started Tai Chi at 50. Now I'm 68, and doctors ask me for it.
In the meeting with Larijani, when Larijani met Putin. So Putin met Larijani, he met the Iranian defense minister as well, and apparently there were other Russian military and defense officials also present in this meeting. So this looks like a very, very big meeting. And on top of this, I've been getting reports which have been coming out of Russia this time that the Iranians now are moving forward, finally, on acquiring sophisticated weapon systems. And that that there's an Iranian team in Russia training on S-400 and S-300 systems. Now, this is information from Russia. You remember we had the same stories in the summer, but they came from the United States. This time, they come from Russia itself. And it looks as if this information is reliable. So the Iranians are finally now apparently training on Russian air defense systems. And it's likely that we're going to see further moves by the Russians to supply more weapons, perhaps aircraft, to Iran as well. So the reports say that it takes about a year for Iran for personnel to really train to use systems as advanced as the S-400, and it takes up to 2 years to achieve full proficiency. So if there is a resumption in the fighting with Israel in the autumn, it's not going to be the S-300s and the S-400s are not going to be ready. I mean, these are more advanced S-300s, I should say, than the ones that Iran was supplied with before. But you can see what's finally happening. The Iranians are finally committing to a long drawn out confrontation with Israel and potentially the United States as well. And it looks as if negotiations between Iran and the United States over Iran's nuclear program are at a standstill. The Russians have been trying some level of mediation. Putin had 2 rather mysterious telephone calls with Netanyahu. In relation to the second, the Russians provided no readout at all. There's reports from Israel that Putin brought up the status of the Russian Orthodox Church in Israel and talked about Gaza. But I suspect that most of the discussion was about Iran. And the Russians have perhaps been trying to mediate between the Israelis and the Iranians, but it doesn't look as if they've been very successful. And in the meantime, the Iranians are now seriously rearming. So we could be looking at a resumption of the conflict in the autumn and a long war thereafter. And that's what the Iranians appear to think.
Well, the United States and Israel, they see all this, obviously.
Absolutely.
They know what's going on. So how are they going to counter this? What moves are they going to make? Is Trump's rush one of the reasons that Trump is rushing to figure out Ukraine? Is it because he understands that there's going to be a resumption in the conflict with Iran? Could that be one of the reasons, one of many? But maybe he's saying, you know what, we need to figure out Ukraine, or at least get out of Ukraine, because come autumn, we're going to start things up again with Iran, and Israel's going to start things up again with Iran. So what do you think is going to happen from the U.S. Israeli side of things?
I think you're absolutely right. I think I think that is absolutely one of the prime drivers of the American attempts to resume a dialogue with the Russians, because of course the Russians have leverage here. and important leverage. I mean, they have leverage over Iran because they're going to be the main weapons and suppliers and the main diplomatic and economic backers of Iran at this time. And of course, the Americans are, as you rightly say, perfectly aware of all of this. And they're perfectly well aware of the increasing stresses in Israel itself. And of course, the Israelis can see what's happening. And they're going to be saying to themselves this: if we leave this too long, the Iranians are going to get very strong because they're going to get all of these advanced missiles and technology from the Russians. The Russians have in the past talked about upgrading the partnership agreement between Russia and Iran. To repeat again, Putin has said that the Russians offered Iran a security agreement similar to the one that Russia has with North Korea. And it was the Iranians who refused. I don't think this is on the table, by the way. I don't think the Iranians want to go there. But the Israelis can see all of this. They will be saying, our window is closing. We've got to resume this attack on Iran soon because we've lost track of Iran's nuclear program. The Iranians are still talking about enriching uranium. They've shut out the IAEA. There are reports that there are other Iranian nuclear facilities and that Natanz and Esfahan are still operating. There's also reports that repair work is now being done by the Iranians in Fordow. So we've got to strike and strike hard, and perhaps again go for a decapitation strike against Iran because time is not on our side. So they're probably telling the Americans all of this, and the Americans probably want to sort out something with the Russians before they find themselves in a crisis with Iran, as they might easily do in the autumn.
So Iran is part of BRICS. Is China doing anything?
Yes, well, this. You remember there was all that speculation and discussion a few weeks ago that Iran was not going to buy weapons from Russia, but it was going to buy weapons from China, and it was looking at the JC-10 fighter jet, and the Iranian defense minister apparently inspected it, and there was a lot of talk about that. That's all melted away. China made it clear that it's not in the business of selling weapons at the moment to Iran. My sense is that the Chinese and the Russians.
I find that a little funny because the information I had was that the Chinese had delivered 40 J-10C jet aircraft.
Yes, exactly.
To the Iranians. Did you see articles on that also?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. That's why I was surprised he said what he said.
Right. So there's a discrepancy there, and I don't know, okay, if Alexander is right. But when I say that, I also have to say that Alexander is usually right. So his remarks have to be taken seriously.
Have long since come to an understanding that it's Russia, which is after all closer to Iran, that is going to be the supplier, the arms supplier to Iran. China does have big economic but prospective big economic relations with Iran. It already buys most of Iran's oil, and the Americans have agreed to allow China to continue to buy Iranian oil. So the Chinese are there. They're the big diplomatic and economic backer. They're the people with the big pockets. But at the moment, we have an immediate crisis or potential crisis, possibly as soon as this autumn. China is far away. Russia is much closer, and it's been left to the Russians.
Right.
Okay, just to remark some more on that. Okay, I was under the impression from many sources that the Iranians already had some S-300 systems earlier So the remark that it takes a year to train on those systems, if the Iranians already had some of those systems, then some of their people are trained on them already. There was also some news that said that the Iranians had not only been training on S-300 systems, not only had S-300 systems, but they had modified some of the S-300 systems which had been improved by the Iranians. So there was that aspect too. So I'm not sure I take everything that Alexander had to say about the S-300 systems and S-400 systems at face value. I also have the impression that there's been a project inside of Iran, of Russia helping to build some, nuclear power plants, in Iran, and that to protect those plants, the Russians had installed at least one S-400 system that I'm sure they must have been training the Iranians to use, since they already had it there, and since already it was going to be used, for defense of the plant, that they were constructing. So what I'm saying here, I suspect that the Iranians are much further along in using S-400 systems and S-400 systems than Alexander is apparently reporting there. But of course, we shall see soon whether they do have a greater capability in the area of S-300 systems and S-400 systems than Alexander has indicated in that particular section. There was also some news that the Iranians themselves had just coming online a very advanced air defense system of their own. So I think that's to be taken into account also. And then finally, with respect to the next war, I've been reading, that the Iranians are coming on, with many, more technologically advanced kinds of missiles. New missiles they've not used before in the war, but are preparing to use in the final stages. I shouldn't say in the final stages, but in the next round of strikes. Those missiles are supposed to be very, very formidable. They're hypersonic, of course, and faster than anything the Iranians have yet employed in striking Israel. So I expect the next round of strikes by the Iranians against Israel are going to be much more devastating than anything we've seen so far.
Yes. Yes, I've read about that as well.
Yes. So now we come to our last topic of the evening, which is the patience, of Putin. And we have Scott Ritter once again talking about this particular subject. It's interesting that we had so many videos involving Scott tonight. That wasn't really planned, but it just went on, as we developed the show. There was just so many relevant things that he was talking about, this week. He's been everywhere on all sorts of channels. I do want to entertain a few comments before I move on. And Mr. Wonderful, of course, they do have a choice, and for the better if they resume trade relations with Russia. But they are so in debt in Ukraine. They are trying to steal Russia's frozen assets to offset the loss. Yes, I know they are. Completely illegal, by the way. Evelina Pont says, be nice to have a show on how climate is already being used in the hybrid war. Thank you, Evelina. That's an interesting suggestion. I will consider it. Mr. Wonderful said, and that's what is also explained within the video sourced. I recommend seeing it. Evelina says hybrid warfare, to be clear. Okay. Thank you. So now we move on to our last topic, which is the patience of Putin. And let me pull up the final video for tonight. Okay, this is the program.
A path towards peace. And that's why they continue to
Okay, let me see where I have to start this out now. Yeah. This one we're going to start at about 1350 in.
People come to us and their teeth are so bad that they all need to be extracted. They all need to be taken out, and they get
To respond to that, it's so profound and so emotional. Is Iran preparing for another war with Israel?
Iran is ready for another war with Israel. To say they're preparing for another war with Israel is to imply that Iran is the one who is causing the problem here. Israel has made it clear, and so has Donald Trump, that this war isn't over. And they are now confronted with the reality that Iran is not going to surrender, that Iran is not going to bend the knee, that Iran is not going to continue to play the game, the same game that led to the duplicity of the United States and Israel in carrying out a surprise attack against Iran, killing the negotiators as they prepared for a negotiation that President Trump promised not only would occur, but could bring an end to this crisis. Iran will never again trust the West. And so Iran will believe Israel and believe the United States when they say they will respond. So Iran is building the capability to be absolutely devastating in its response to any attack. We have the United States evacuating bases in the Middle East because they understand the next time Iran isn't going to give a courtesy call. The next time Iran strikes, they will strike to kill. And Israel better understand, because Iran now has released evidence of the existence of new weapons that will not only overwhelm their ballistic missile defense systems, but destroy decisively what they hit on the ground. Iran is preparing to do this. Does Iran want to do this? Absolutely not. Iran won't start this fight, but be damn sure that if this fight takes place, Iran's going to finish it on Iran's terms.
Switching gears to Ukraine, in 1 week,
that was a very clear and forthright statement, of course, by Scott, as is often the case with him. No ifs, ands, or buts. Iran will finish it, on its own terms if Israel attacks. Very interesting opinion.
President Trump authorized the Iranians to fire thousands of EROMs. I want you to tell me what EROMs are in a minute. And he also said this, Chris, the full screen. It's very hard, if not impossible, to win a war without attacking an invader's country. It's like a great team in sports that has a fantastic defense, but it's not allowed to play offense. There's no chance of winning. It's like that with Ukraine and Russia. Crooked and grossly incompetent Joe Biden would not let Ukraine fight back, only defend. How did that work out? Regardless, this war that never would have happened if I were president, zero chance. Interesting times ahead, President DJT. It sounds like the man who wants to win the Nobel Peace Prize, the man who embraced very warmly Vladimir Putin in Anchorage, who sent an image of a bonding and breaking down of barriers that had been established by the Biden administration, that man now wants to ratchet up the war, America's proxy war against Russia.
Yeah, I mean it's tough language, but let me try to do the impossible and explain Donald Trump. Let's not forget that Donald Trump is fully aware of a certain reality. And that reality is that there are strategic strikes into the depth of Russia carried out by non-nuclear powers acting at the behest or empowered by nuclear powers. Russia will treat that as attack as if it came from the nuclear power. This is Russia's nuclear doctrine, the one that was promulgated last year in November. At that time, the CIA, when reading this nuclear doctrine and considering the fact that Joe Biden was about to give permission to the Ukrainians to use American-provided ATACMS missiles to strike into the strategic depth of Russia, the CIA said there's a better than 50% chance there will be a nuclear war by the end of the year. That's the CIA. That's not Scott Ritter calling, the sky is falling, the sky is falling. That's the CIA giving a cold-hearted assessment that if we allow Ukraine to strike Russia strategically using American-provided weapons, Russia could very well use nuclear weapons in response. This led Donald Trump to make a statement in early December that said, when I'm president, I won't allow this policy to continue, because he understands the ramifications of it. He knows the risks. And so I have to believe that that same knowledge base exists. He's under pressure right now because Ukraine is getting their butts kicked. Every lie Donald Trump was told to tell, because again, he is not the originator of data. He's fed this data by people about the number of Russian casualties, and smaller amounts of Ukrainian casualties have been proven to be a lie. We now know that Ukraine has suffered 1.7 million dead and missing, 625,000 dead and missing this year alone. That's 90,000 a month. 90,000 a month, Ukrainian dead and missing. We know this to be the case. Ukraine can't replace them. Russia is pummeling them. And the president's trying to create the conditions for some sort of, ending of this conflict. But in order to do that, he has to be seen as not abandoning Ukraine. So he puts out this god-awful statement, which is as stupid as possible. And then he backs it up by saying that the United States, in 6 weeks' time, I believe, is going to sell Ukraine 3,600 and some odd ERAM missiles, the ERAM missile. The ERAM missile is a missile specifically designed, extended range attack munition, I think it is, specifically designed by the U.S. Air Force in 2023, 2024 for Ukraine. It's supposed to be an accurate system that can be delivered by the aircraft available to the Ukrainians that provide up to 700 kilometers worth of strike distance into Russian territory to level the playing field. The thing about it is,
say goodbye to your reading glasses, computer glasses, and even your sunglasses. Introducing the revolutionary autofocus glasses powered.
It was conceived in 2023, 2024, but it would take 2 years to bring it up to production. Gosh, I don't know. That's 2025. So they haven't even begun serial production of this munition yet. When they do, the maximum sustained production capacity for ERAMs is 1,000 missiles a year. Now, we are talking 6 weeks from now. If they begin serial production today, we're going to be able to deliver, 10, 15 missiles to Ukraine. And here's the kicker. They can't use them because the United States has to approve the targets. So Trump knows that if the Ukrainians use an ERAM against Russia, the Russians will know that we targeted it. Therefore, we have become directly involved in this conflict. We are a direct participant of this conflict, and that's the end of any peace treaty. So this is just stupidity on the part of the president, who will never allow these weapons to be used because he can't allow these weapons to be used. He knows what will happen. It was a 50% chance of nuclear war last year. I would imagine the odds even gone up given the stakes at play here. So this is just political posturing by the dumbest man in the world. And I'm sitting here trying to work with this guy to bring an end to this conflict, to have better relations, to bring about, nuclear arms control. And he's saying the right things about the potential of this. But then he does something like this. Thank God Vladimir Putin is a very smart man, a very patient man, and he's not going to take the bait. This is just not going to happen. This is something that is not going to happen because it can't happen. We don't have the ability to follow through on this. And even if we were to provide them with these weapons, they can't use them in the way that they would desire to use them because it would get us involved in a war that would very likely end nuclear.
It makes you wonder, General Kellogg, Secretary Rubio, Secretary Hegseth, do they know what's going on? Are they feeding this nonsense to him? Are they encouraging him to say all these things? There's Kellogg. We thought he was out of the picture, but he's right there on the other side of Trump. It's not shown in this picture of Zelensky. So this was a very significant gathering in the Oval Office.
This is Kellogg's
Or is
baby.
he listening to Lindsey Graham in a golf cart?
Yeah, this is Kellogg. This is Rubio. Not so much Hegseth, although this is a system that was developed and Hegseth's going to play the economic game. As I said before, Hegseth's a battalion operations officer operating several pay grades above what he should be. He's not qualified to be Secretary of Defense. And this is one of the reasons why. This is the kind of thing you veto. This is the kind of thing you say, hell no. But you got Marco Rubio, who does not want this policy to succeed. And I hope the president understands that Rubio is not his friend, not his ally. Rubio is his enemy. And Rubio is empowered by Keith Kellogg, who is the antithesis of settlement. He's a man who has embraced 100% the Ukrainian narrative. He doesn't, he downplays everything the Russian says. He's the one who pollutes President Trump's mind with the nonsense about casualties. And he's the one who's pushed the ERAM missile solution. It's something that Zelensky's been asking for. This is to placate Zelensky. They gave Kellogg a medal. He marched up yesterday on Ukrainian National Day and received a medal from the Ukrainian president. Why? We now know the answer.
Did the Russians destroy German Taurus missiles over the weekend? And did President Putin more or less say to Chancellor Merz, enough is enough, pal. You want Berlin to look like it did after World War II? Keep this up.
Well, I think Medvedev might have said that.
All right, I'm getting a little carried away. I apologize.
Yeah, Putin is far more mature, and he doesn't say things like that. He doesn't issue idle threats. But what the Russians are very good at doing is letting actions speak for themselves. And what we've seen over the course of the past week is Russia has begun the deliberate targeting and destruction, not just a signal. In the past, they've sent a cruise missile in to blow up a workshop here, a workshop there to send a signal. We know what's going on. Now they're coming in and leveling facilities. They've leveled an electronics facility, American-made Flex. They've taken out the facility that was built by the Germans to produce long-range missiles, including analogs of the Taurus. And they're showing that their intelligence is impeccable, meaning that they can track material into Ukraine and target it before it becomes operational. And this should be a lesson to anybody talking about the ERAM. It will never be used. They're going to show up in airfields in Western Ukraine, and the Russians will deploy the weapon systems necessary to take them out. The Russians, they've been producing, I guess apparently they have a lot of washing machines because apparently they need those chips from the washing machines to make their missiles work. But their missile production is way up. At the beginning of the war, they would parse out, a Kinzhal here, a Kinzhal there, a Zircon, but they didn't want to use these weapons because they didn't have that many of them. You always have to keep some in reserve in case the balloon goes up with NATO. Now they're just pop 6 Kinzhals, 6 into a single factory to level it. Why? Because defense industry is pumping them out like candy. So I think, this game is over. The Russians, just the other day, the Ukrainians, Russia respected the Ukrainian National Day, not a single attack. Total respect. And during that time, Ukraine reached out and struck Russian refining capacity outside of Leningrad and elsewhere. You really think tonight's going to be a quiet night in Ukraine? You think that this week's going to be quiet in Ukraine? Ukraine's going to get flat. Again, only military targets and all that. But the Russians, they're not playing games right now. They are in the process of collapsing the Ukrainian military on the battlefield, and they're going to collapse Ukraine's military defense industry. They're going to make it clear to Europe that no amount of money you provide will result in anything meaningful, that every dollar, every euro you spend in Ukraine will be destroyed. And this is at a time when the German economy, because of the policies of the German government, is on the verge of absolute collapse.
You have as great an understanding of the Russian mentality as any American that I know. And it's because of your homework, much of which you've done in Russia, interacting with Russian people. What do you think the Kremlin thinks Trump is up to? Does he really want peace?
You really don't have an option about whether or not you're going to develop a vision for.
My understanding, and again, this is just my take, is that the Russians truly believe that Donald Trump is looking for an off-ramp. And that left to his own devices, he would definitely, we'd be out of this conflict already. They also recognize, and they've said this over and over again, the obstacles that he faces. The Russians understand that not only does he face opposition in the opposing party, but even within his own party, within Congress, people who have bought into this conflict, people who've embraced the narrative that Ukraine is good, Russia is bad. Donald Trump is fighting decades of Russophobia, the infection of the American mindset, so that we're programmed to accept at face value anything negative said about Russia. We're incapable of processing anything positive or the Russian reality. They understand that the academic institutions in the United States are thoroughly corrupt. When you have Hillary Clinton and Victoria Nuland teaching Russian area studies at Columbia, when you have Michael...
That's amazing. That is really...
McFaul polluting the minds.
I don't think any of them know a thing about Russia.
No, they don't.
I don't think they've studied the history of Russia. I don't think they've studied the culture of Russia. I don't think they know anything about the language, the Russian language. I'm sure I have more background in Russian than either Victoria Nuland or Hillary Clinton.
Exactly. It's maddening. It really is.
It is maddening. And I am what? I think I must be 65 years away from my studies of Russian as a language. I'm not 65 years away from studying Russia, but 65 years away from taking the language. And I'm sure I still know more than those two. It's ridiculous.
To Stanford graduates, you can't have sound academic foundations upon which to build positive outcomes. They know that even within Donald Trump's own inner circle, people who are supposed to be supporting him don't support him. Marco Rubio is not a fan of these policies. Keith Kellogg is sabotaging him. Pete Hegseth is too stupid to live when it comes to Russia. Doesn't know what he's doing. Steve Witkoff is a loyal lieutenant, but he's not the originator of policy. His job is to take the president's desires and take him to Russia and see them enacted upon. But he's not there to articulate original thought about Russia because he's incapable of it. In fact, whenever you delve into details, nuances about Russia, Witkoff falls apart because he knows nothing about Russia at all. This president is ill-served by his administration, by the establishment, by the American people. But the Russian government still has faith that Donald Trump, whom they respect, they are willing to tolerate any amount of nonsense because they understand the political reality in which he operates. They believe that he wants to find a path towards peace. And that's why they continue to put up with this garbage. That's why they continue to be patient, because otherwise they could just unplug.
I will spare you Lindsey Graham's latest, but I cannot spare you President Macron's latest. I don't know if you've seen this, but if this is the attitude of of European leaders about Russia, World War III is around the corner. Chris, cut number 9.
So, a country that invests 40% of its budget in such equipment, that has mobilized an army of more than 1,300,000 men, it will not return to a state of peace and an open democratic system overnight. Let's not be naive. And so, even for its own survival, it needs to keep feeding itself. That's it. So, it's a predator, it's an ogre at our doorstep. I'm not saying that France will be attacked as soon as tomorrow, but still it's a threat to Europeans. We must not be naive. And I say this with immense respect for the Russian people, for that country, its great history, its tradition, and its leaders. But that's where we are. We must not be naive.
I have to say, Judge, when I went to Russia in December of 23, January 24, and I went to the Donbass, and I visited. I didn't get to the front lines. They wouldn't let me anywhere near. They're not going to let a 64-year-old American, man die. But I got to interview the soldiers and some of the generals off the front line and talk to them. They gave me this patch to wear on my coat, and it's an orc. It's it's an orc because the Ukrainians call them orcs, and we just heard Macron call them ogres. The Russians, they're no longer insulted by stupidity of this nature. First of all, they don't take Macron seriously at all. He's a non-entity, a non-factor. What does France bring to the table? Nothing. No military, force of any note. France is nullified. If the political trends continue, Macron won't be president very long. There'll be a new party in place that will reverse trend. So this is Macron just being stupid. But the sad thing is, Macron's the words that he used are words that could have easily been spoken by any of the European political and economic elite. This is an infection of the minds of the Europeans. This is the danger of Russophobia here in America, because what we're seeing is Russophobia on the extreme end, the extreme spectrum. This is what happens when you are infected with Russophobia. You start to speak in this manner. It's so devoid of reality, so far removed from the Russian reality and what Russian policy is and what the Russians want. He ignores history. Why is there 1.3 million soldiers in Russia? Because NATO expanded to Finland and Sweden, compelling Russia to do things like, put 70,000 men on outside of St. Petersburg to protect it against, NATO troops coming out of Finland, to expand the Kola Peninsula force. Russia didn't want to do this. Russia wasn't seeking to expand its military, but it has no choice when NATO expands to its very borders. When NATO provides hundreds of billions of dollars of military equipment to allow the Ukrainian army to build up to the size of 800,000. Russia has a military of 1.3 million. That's to cover everything. And the Russians are kicking the hell out of 800,000 NATO-trained, equipped Ukrainian soldiers in Ukraine. Macron is just literally an imbecile, a moron. I apologize. I shouldn't use words like that. My wife gets very mad at me. But no, this is insulting to the Russians, what he said. But the good news is the Russians have a hell of a good sense of humor. Like I said, their response will be just to wear more of these.
Scotty, you're the best. Thank you very much, my dear friend. Please don't apologize for your words or for your anger. I am sure that Mrs. Ritter is accustomed to them by now, as are we. Thank you, my dear friend. We'll look forward to seeing you again next week. All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's that. Okay. And I think Scott is right that Putin is being very, very patient in the face of idiocy and in the face of where we started tonight, the warhawkery of the the dwarves, the 7 dwarves. They can't seem to think of anything else, okay, except for war. They've got serious internal problems themselves. Their nations are falling apart. Their political systems are falling apart. Their social safety nets, are falling apart. And all they can think about is fighting the Russians inside of Ukraine, as if that's going to save them. It is not going to save them.
No, it's not.
Okay, that is that. So it's got to stop. The whole war has got to stop. Okay, it's got to end. That's partly dependent on Trump. He's got to stop sending them stuff. And as far as these ERAMs is concerned, he shouldn't even send them a single ERAM. He should just let the process go to its completion. If it does, it should be over very, very soon, as I've been saying. And on that note, I think it's time to say good night.
I think so too.
Okay, we have again reached the midnight mark. We haven't gone too far over that, I'm proud to say.
Are there any more comments there?
No, the last comment was Mr. Wonderful's comment.
Okay.
That Ritter is 100% right.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Steve G2 is here. According to local sources, Israeli occupation forces stole nearly 1 million shekels, approximately 270,000 in USD, after storming a currency exchange shop in the heart of in the heart of the Ramallah area this morning. So they're involved in petty theft also. If you consider $270,000 to be petty theft, I guess in the scale of what they're all spending, it probably is petty theft. Anyway, I think that's all for tonight. Thank you very much for coming, Dee.
And thank you for having me. And I just want to tell everybody to remember to hit the like button, subscribe to Joe's YouTube channel, and please follow him on X.
Yes, on X and on Facebook and on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
I was okay on Facebook tonight. There wasn't any problem. I don't know what the problem was on Saturday, but whatever it was, it seems to be gone.
Sometimes it's weird when you put the shows up, and it just seems to be there's something out there that's not allowing whatever the subject you're talking about just at that particular time.
I know that. It's kind of strange.
Yes.
Okay, Dee, do you want to tell us what you'll be talking about tomorrow night and for the rest of the week before Saturday?
I'm trying to think. I'm not sure if Madeline is going to be on tomorrow night. She may join me. And then also on Thursday, Harshmed will be joining me. And we'll just be talking about current events, what's happening around the world. It's just so much. It's just so horrific, and so many people are just really feeling overwhelmed. People are feeling sick. It's it's just it's just too much on people. And it's actually with people watching everything, and people want something to be done, and nothing's being done.
I know, it's terribly frustrating.
And then you keep thinking about what the people are going through.
Yes, and we all see this evil, and the nations just won't do anything to stop it. It's incredible. That's like the 1930s with the Nazis.
Yeah. And then you could say you didn't have the the communication. People said they didn't know, and there was always a controversy. Did they know what they knew and all that? Now it's everybody does know. There's no saying, you didn't know.
I know.
It's just horrific. It really is.
Yeah. So thanks again for joining.
Yes, and thank you for having me. And good night, Bonnie.
Good night. Okay, good night, everyone.
Yes, good night. Thank you, everyone, for being here.
I'll be back on Saturday.
Yes, you will. With a very busy show, as
Yeah.
usual.
I guess my shows have started getting busier and busier, haven't they?
They have, but you nicely tie things together.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I've been trying to plan them so that they don't go much over 12 midnight. I noticed the last few times I was successful at that. So
Yes, you are. Very good.
that's good. So good night again.
Yes, good night.